Yo, what's up everyone? It's Gringotts Hub, and today we're checking out, what if Goblin blood test revealed Harry was the last sovereign of magic and Dumbledore had hidden 16 lordships. Drop a like if you're hyped. Subscribe for daily content. Let's get this story started. Chapter 1, Blood and Gold. The cupboard under the stairs had been 4 feet tall and 6 feet long. Harry remembered this with perfect clarity because he'd measured it once with a bit of string he'd nicked from Aunt Petunia's sewing kit when he was 7. 4 feet by 6 feet. That had been his world for 10 years. He thought about that cupboard now as he sat on the edge of his bed at number 4, Privet Drive, pressing a cold flannel to his split lip and listening to Uncle Vernon's heavy footsteps recede down the staircase. The bedroom was bigger than the cupboard. That was about the nicest thing you could say about it. The clock on the broken nightstand read 2:30 in the morning. July 7th. He'd been back from Hogwarts for exactly 9 days, and already the summer stretched ahead of him like a prison sentence. Hedwig clicked her beak softly from her cage. "I know, girl," Harry murmured. "I know." Cedric Diggory had been dead for 3 weeks. Harry could still feel the weight of his body, the way it had slumped against him in the graveyard, already cooling. He could still hear Voldemort's high, cold laugh. And what had the wizarding world's great protector done about it? Albus Dumbledore had looked at Harry over his half-moon spectacles, told him he'd done wonderfully, and shipped him back to the Dursleys like a parcel nobody wanted. "For your protection," the letter had said. "The blood wards require." Harry crumpled the thought like waste paper. He was done with blood wards. Done with protection that tasted like captivity. Done with sitting in this tiny room waiting for someone to tell him what was happening in his own bloody life. He pulled the flannel away from his lip and looked at the blood on it. Vernon had caught him coming out of the kitchen. A glass of water at 2 in the morning, that had been his crime. The big man had been drunk, which was new and ugly, and the backhand had come without warning. Harry hadn't even reached for his wand. That was the part that bothered him most. Not the hit. The fact that he'd just taken it, like the 10-year-old boy in the cupboard would have. Something shifted in his chest. Not anger, exactly. Something quieter. Something that had been building since the graveyard, since Dumbledore's office, since 9 days of silence from every person he'd thought cared about him. He was done. Harry stood up, and the decision was so clean and complete that it felt like stepping through a door. He pulled his trunk from under the bed, stuffed his meager belongings into it, and shrunk it with a tap of his wand. Underage magic laws be damned. He pocketed it, opened Hedwig's cage, and whispered, "Fly to London. Find me at the Leaky Cauldron." The snowy owl nipped his finger once, gently, and vanished through the open window into the dark. Harry didn't bother with the front door. He climbed out the window, dropped to the garage roof, and slid down to the back garden. The night air hit him and he breathed it in like he'd been underwater. He stuck out his wand hand, and the night bus came screaming out of the darkness 30 seconds later. Stan Shunpike's pimply face appeared in the door. "Welcome to the Diagon Alley," Harry said, climbing aboard. "And I don't want to chat." Stan blinked, looked at the bruise forming on Harry's jaw, and for once in his life found the good sense to shut his mouth. The night bus lurched forward, and number 4, Privet Drive disappeared behind him. Harry didn't look back. London at 3 in the morning was a different creature than London at noon. The Leaky Cauldron was nearly empty, just old Tom wiping down the bar and a witch in the corner who'd fallen asleep in her butterbeer. Tom looked up when Harry walked in and had the good grace not to ask questions. "Room for the night," Harry said, putting galleons on the bar. "Maybe longer." "Number 11's free, Mr. Potter." "Quiet, faces the back." "Perfect." Harry didn't sleep. He sat on the narrow bed in room 11 and thought. Not the desperate, spiraling thoughts that had chased him through the first 9 days of summer. These were clean. Structured. He was asking himself a question he'd never asked before. What do I actually know about myself? He was Harry Potter. He was the boy who lived. He was a wizard. His parents had been murdered. He had a vault at Gringotts with a decent pile of gold in it. Dumbledore was his, what? Headmaster. Mentor. The man who decided where Harry lived, what Harry knew, when Harry was allowed to participate in his own destiny. And that was it. That was all he knew. 15 years old, a Dark Lord actively trying to kill him, and Harry knew less about his own family, his own heritage, his own place in the magical world than Malfoy had known at age 11. That hadn't happened by accident. He sat with that realization for a long time. The sky outside the window turned from black to gray to pale gold. Hedwig arrived and settled on the headboard, tucking her head under her wing. And Harry kept thinking. By the time the sun was fully up, he had a plan. It wasn't complicated. It didn't need to be. He was going to Gringotts, and he was going to find out who he actually was. Diagon Alley on a Tuesday morning was pleasantly uncrowded. Harry moved through it with his hood up, not because he was hiding, but because he didn't want to be slowed down by autograph seekers and gawkers. He had one destination. Gringotts Bank rose at the end of the alley like a marble fist. The bronze doors gleamed in the morning sun, and the inscription above them, the one warning thieves of the consequences, seemed particularly pointed today. Harry walked through the doors, past the armored goblin guards who tracked him with black, glittering eyes, and into the main hall. The chandeliers threw crystalline light across acres of marble. Goblins worked at their high desks, and a handful of witches and wizards queued at the counters, looking small and slightly uncomfortable, the way humans always did in Gringotts. Harry walked past all of them. He went straight to the central desk, where the most senior-looking goblin sat scratching figures into a ledger with a quill that looked like it was made from a raven's flight feather. The goblin didn't look up. Q is to the left. My name is Harry James Potter, Harry said, and I'd like to speak with someone about a full inheritance and blood test. The quill stopped moving. The goblin looked up, and for just a moment, barely a flicker, something passed through those dark eyes that might have been surprise. Or satisfaction. It was hard to tell with goblins. A blood inheritance test, the goblin repeated. Full and comprehensive. Every title, every vault, every claim. I want to know everything. The goblin studied him for a long, measuring moment. Then he set down his quill with a precise click. Wait here, Mr. Potter. He disappeared through a door behind the desk. Harry stood in the middle of Gringotts Grand Hall with his hands in his pockets and felt, for the first time in weeks, like he was doing something that mattered. 3 minutes later, the goblin returned. He wasn't alone. Behind him came another goblin, older and broader, wearing armor inlaid with gold and carrying a staff topped with a ruby the size of a quail's egg. This goblin moved with the particular confidence of someone who could order executions before lunch and still enjoy his meal. Mr. Potter, said the armored goblin. I am Ragnarok, director of Gringotts London. Follow me. Not a request. Harry followed. They walked through corridors Harry had never seen before, past the public areas, through doors warded with magic that tingled against his skin, down a flight of stone stairs lit by floating orbs of pale fire. The walls here were rough-hewn granite, old beyond reckoning, carved with runes that seemed to shift when Harry tried to read them. Ragnarok led him into a circular chamber deep in the bank's foundations. The room was dominated by a stone basin sitting on a pedestal of dark metal. The basin was filled with a liquid that looked like mercury but glowed faintly silver. Along the walls, shelves held hundreds of crystalline vials, and the air smelled of iron and old magic. Sit, Ragnarok said, gesturing to a stone chair facing the basin. Harry sat. Thank you for seeing me so quickly. Ragnarok's mouth twitched. On a goblin, it might have been a smile. We have been waiting for you to walk through those doors for 4 years, Mr. Potter. We sent you 7 letters requesting exactly this meeting. You never responded. Harry went very still. I never received any letters from Gringotts. No, Ragnarok said. I don't imagine you did. They looked at each other, and something unspoken passed between them. An understanding. The blood inheritance test, Ragnarok said, setting his staff against the wall and moving to the basin, is the most comprehensive assessment Gringotts offers. It will reveal your full lineage, any titles or claims attached to your blood, active magical bindings or blocks on your person, and any financial irregularities related to your accounts. He produced a ceremonial dagger from his belt, black-bladed, wickedly sharp, with goblin runes running along its edge. 7 drops of blood into the basin. The sovereign Mercury will do the rest. Harry took the dagger. Will it hurt? It is a knife, Mr. Potter. Of course it will hurt. Harry almost laughed. He pressed the blade to his left palm and drew it across in one quick motion. It stung sharply. Blood welled up, impossibly red against his skin, and he held his hand over the basin and let it fall. 1 drop. 2. 3. Each one hit the silver liquid and sang, a clear, crystalline note, like a finger running along the rim of a wine glass. The mercury churned, spiraled, began to glow. 4. 5. 6. The light intensified. The runes on the walls were definitely moving now, rearranging themselves, and Harry felt something respond deep in his chest, a vibration, as if a string that had always been taut inside him was finally being plucked. 7. The basin erupted. Not with liquid, with light. A column of brilliant gold shot from the mercury and hit the ceiling, and the entire chamber hummed with a frequency Harry felt in his bones. Ragnarok stumbled back a step. The crystalline vials on the shelves rattled. What? Harry started. Be silent, Ragnarok breathed. He was staring at the basin with an expression Harry had never seen on a goblin's face before. It took him a moment to place it. All. The light coalesced. It folded in on itself, condensing, and from the basin rose a sheet of parchment, except it wasn't parchment. It was something older, something that seemed to be made of compressed light given physical form. It floated above the basin, and words began to burn across its surface in letters of gold and black. Harry leaned forward and read. Gringotts Bank, Blood Inheritance Assessment Subject, Harry James Potter. Date, July 7, 1995. Lineage, Paternal House of Potter, Ancient and Noble House, founded 382 AD. Heir status, Lord, last of line, Vault access, Potter Family Vault, 687, Potter Legacy Vault, 12, House of Peveril, Ancient and Most Noble House, founded circa 100 AD. Heir status, Lord, last of line, by blood right through Ignotus Peveril, Vault access, Peveril Vault, 3, House of Gryffindor, Founders House. Heir status, Lord, by blood right, Vault access, Gryffindor Founders Vault, 1G, Lineage, Maternal House of Evans, Minor Noble House, elevated 1402 through Crown Service, Heir status, Lord, last of line, Vault access, Evans Family Vault, 904, House of Ravenclaw, Founders House. Heir status, Lord, by blood right through Dagworth line, Vault access, Ravenclaw Founders Vault, 1R, Lineage, Convergent Bloodlines. House of Black, Ancient and Most Noble House. Heir status, Lord, designated heir per Sirius. Orion Black, ratified by blood magic, Vault access, Black Family Vault, 711, House of Slytherin, Founders House. Heir status, Lord, by right of magical conquest, Basilisk Chamber, 1993, Vault access, Slytherin Founders Vault, 1S, House of Hufflepuff, Founders House. Heir status, Lord, by blood right through Smith Hufflepuff line, maternal, Vault access, Hufflepuff Founders Vault, 1H, House of Gaunt, Noble House, defunct, Heir status, Lord, by right of magical conquest over Tom Marvolo. Riddle, House of Flamel, Ancient House. Heir status, Lord, designated heir per Nicholas Flamel, Testament filed 1992, House of Emrys, Primordial House, founded circa 500 AD. Heir status, Lord, by blood right, dormant line activated, House of Lefay, Primordial House. Heir status, Lord, by blood right through convergent maternal lines, House of Pendragon, Royal Magical House Heir Status, Lord. By blood right through Emrys Pendragon Union, House of Aldrich, Elder House, Pre-Roman, Heir Status. Lord, by blood right, House of Wulfric, Elder House, Saxon Magical, Heir Status, Lord, by blood right, total Lordships, 16. Harry read it once. Then again. The words didn't change. 16 Lordships. For founders' houses. Emrys. That was, Merlin, he said. Emrys is Merlin's house. Yes, Ragnarok said. His voice had changed. The brisk, businesslike tone was gone. He was speaking carefully now, the way someone speaks when they're delivering news that changes the shape of the world. Continue reading, Mr. Potter. Harry looked back at the glowing document. Below the lineage section, new words were still burning into existence. Supreme title, activated by blood convergence. The above lineages converge in the subject to activate a dormant supreme title last held by Aldrich Emrys Pendragon in 1087 AD. Title, Sovereign of Magic status, confirmed, last living heir. The Sovereign of Magic holds dominion over all magical institutions within the British Isles by right of blood, including but not limited to, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, all 4 founder claims, the Wisengamot, hereditary supreme seat, and all treaties between magical races ratified under sovereign authority. Harry's mouth was dry. He kept reading. Active magical bindings detected on subject magical core suppression ward, applied November 1, 1981, cast by Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, suppressing approximately 85% of magical core capacity. Blood ward, modified, applied November 1, 1981, cast by Albus Dumbledore. Modified from standard protective ward to include loyalty compulsion toward caster and emotional suppression. Memory alteration ward, applied July 31, 1991, cast by Albus Dumbledore, preventing access to Hogwarts magical memories. Tracking charm, permanent, applied September 1, 1991, cast by Albus Dumbledore. Mail redirection ward, applied November 1, 1981, cast by Albus Dumbledore. All mail from Gringotts, solicitors, and titled houses redirected to Dumbledore's office. Magical inheritance block, applied July 31, 1993, cast by Albus Dumbledore, preventing activation of lordship rings and title claims. Horcrux soul fragment, embedded in curse scar, origin, Tom Marvolo Riddle, October 31. 1981. Financial irregularities. Unauthorized withdrawals from Potter family vault, 687, since November 1, 1981, Albus Dumbledore, Magical Guardian, self-appointed 2,400,000 galleons, Molly Weasley, authorized by Dumbledore 340,000 galleons, noted as stipend for housing and care subject, no such care provided. Hogwarts School Fund, authorized by Dumbledore 800,000 galleons, Order of the Phoenix Operations, authorized by Dumbledore 1,200,000 galleons. Total unauthorized withdrawals, 4,740,000 galleons. The chamber was very quiet. The golden light from the document cast shifting shadows on the walls. Harry stared at the numbers, at the names, at the clinical precision with which his entire life had been dissected and laid bare. 85% of his magical core. Suppressed. Since he was a baby. Every letter intercepted. Every title blocked. His money stolen. His mind tampered with. And then, at the bottom, like a footnote to the systematic dismantling of his life, a piece of Voldemort's soul, lodged in his skull for 14 years. Harry became aware that his hands were gripping the arms of the stone chair so tightly that his knuckles had gone white. The cut on his palm was still bleeding, and the blood was dripping onto the stone floor, and where it fell, the granite was glowing. The Weasleys, Harry said, and his voice sounded strange to his own ears. Flat. Controlled. Molly Weasley. The withdrawals are documented and verified, Ragnarok said. Not Arthur. The authorization was solely in the name of Molly Weasley, countersigned by Albus Dumbledore. Harry filed that away. Not all of them, then. Maybe not any of the children. He'd deal with it later. Right now, there was something more important. "The bindings on me," he said. "Can you remove them?" Ragnarok bared his teeth. This time, it was definitely a smile. "Mr. Potter, we have been waiting to remove them. Goblin cursebreakers have studied the suppression matrix on your file for years. Dumbledore's work is clever, but it is not goblin work. We can dismantle every single binding, including," he paused. "Including the soul fragment." Harry looked up sharply. "You can remove the Horcrux." "We can. The process is painful but carries no lasting harm. The fragment is parasitic, it feeds on your suppressed magic. Once your core is unbound, it will have nothing to anchor to, and our ritual specialists can extract it cleanly." Harry thought about the thing that had been living in his scar for 14 years. The nightmares. The visions. The connection to Voldemort that everyone treated like an inevitability. "Do it," he said. "All of it. Right now." Ragnarok studied him. "You understand that removing the core suppression will be dramatic. You have been operating at 15% of your capacity for your entire life. When the bindings break, the release will be immediate and total." "I understand. And you understand that claiming your lordships, all 16 of them, will send shockwaves through every magical institution in Britain. The Wisengamot will feel it. The Ministry will feel it. Hogwarts will feel it. There will be no hiding what you are." Harry stood up from the stone chair. He was 15 years old and not particularly tall, and his lip was still split from where his uncle had hit him, and his hand was still bleeding from a goblin dagger. He should have looked small standing in that ancient chamber in front of the director of Gringotts. He didn't. "Director Ragnarok," Harry said, "I have spent my entire life being hidden. I've been hidden in a cupboard, hidden in a house of people who hate me, hidden behind lies told by a man I trusted. I'm done hiding. I want what's mine." Ragnarok slammed his staff against the stone floor. The sound echoed through the chamber like a war drum. "Then let us begin." They moved deeper into the bank, into chambers that Harry suspected most humans had never seen. The architecture changed as they descended, the worked stone gave way to raw cavern, then to something older, something that felt less constructed than grown. The walls were smooth black rock shot through with veins of gold that pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light, like a heartbeat. "The cleansing hall," Ragnarok said, pushing open a pair of massive iron doors. "Built before Gringotts. Before London. The goblins found it when we first came to these islands. We built the bank above it because this place is sacred." The hall was enormous. A natural cavern with a ceiling lost in darkness, its floor covered in concentric rings of goblin runes carved into the bedrock. At the center of the ring stood a stone slab, an altar, Harry realized, though the word felt wrong. It was more like a focal point, a place where the lines of power carved into the floor all converged. A dozen goblins waited in the hall. They were different from the bankers upstairs, these wore robes of deep crimson and carried no weapons. Ritual specialists. Their eyes tracked Harry as he entered, and he saw the same expression he'd seen on Ragnarok's face. They knew what he was. They'd been waiting. "Lie on the slab," Ragnarok said. "The process will take approximately 1 hour. The pain will be," he paused, choosing his words, "significant. We can offer no numbing agents. The magic must be felt to be unraveled." Harry climbed onto the stone slab. It was cold against his back. He stared up into the darkness above and thought about his parents. About whether they'd known what he was. About what their lives might have been like if Dumbledore hadn't. He cut that thought off too. Later. Right now, he needed to be present. "I'm ready." The goblin ritualists took their positions around the concentric rings. Ragnarok himself stood at the head of the slab, his staff raised. He spoke in gobbledygook, a harsh, guttural language that nonetheless had a strange music to it when spoken in ritual cadence. The other goblins responded in unison, their voices rising and falling in a pattern that made the golden veins in the walls pulse faster. The runes on the floor began to glow. White first, then gold, then a deep, burning amber. Harry felt the magic in the room thicken like humidity before a storm. Ragnar brought his staff down. Pain. Not the cruciatus. Harry had that particular horror to compare against, and this was different. The cruciatus was fire and lightning and screaming nerve endings. This was pressure. It was the feeling of something enormous pushing against walls that had held for 14 years, walls that were suddenly being dissolved. His magical core, the thing he'd never been able to feel clearly, the thing that had always seemed muted and distant, roared to life like a furnace with its flue thrown open. Harry's back arched off the slab. Light poured from his skin, not metaphorically, literally. Golden light streamed from his pores, his eyes, his open mouth. The runes on the floor blazed so brightly that the goblin ritualists shielded their eyes. The bindings came apart one by one. He felt each one snap like a chain breaking. The core suppression first, and oh God, was this what magic was supposed to feel like? It was like he'd been breathing through a straw his entire life and someone had just ripped it away. Magic flooded through him, vast and wild and it was singing, it was actually singing. The loyalty compulsions dissolved next, and Harry felt a fog lift from his mind that he hadn't even known was there. Thoughts about Dumbledore that had always circled back to trust him, he knows best, he's protecting you suddenly stood naked and unsupported. Harry examined them with new clarity and felt cold fury settle into his bones. The memory wards cracked. Fragments surged up. He was 3 years old, and a toy was floating across his bedroom, and his mother was laughing, and his father was saying, "That's my boy, that's my little sovereign." His father had known. His mother had known. The tracking charm burned away like paper. The mail redirection ward shattered, and somewhere in Scotland, Harry knew with a certainty that was part of his newly awakened power, that a pile of letters 14 years deep was materializing on a desk in a tower office, and an old man was about to have a very bad morning. And then the ritual reached the Horcrux. The thing in his scar screamed. Not with Harry's voice, with a high, thin, terrible voice that he recognized from nightmares and graveyards. The soul fragment fought. It clawed at the inside of his skull, it sent lances of black energy shooting through the golden light, it raged against being evicted from the home it had parasitized for 14 years. But it was a fragment. A sliver. A broken, pathetic piece of a broken, pathetic man. And Harry's core was unbound now, and the sovereign magic was waking, and the Horcrux was trying to hold on against a tide that could move mountains. Harry grabbed it. Not with his hands, with his will. He felt the fragment, understood it, and pulled. It came free with a sound like tearing silk. A wisp of black smoke erupted from his scar, twisted in the air above him, and the goblin ritualists hit it with 12 simultaneous blasts of purifying fire. The fragment shrieked once, Tom Riddle's voice, young and old and utterly terrified, and disintegrated. The scar on Harry's forehead sealed. Not healed, sealed. The skin smoothed over until only a faint silver line remained where the lightning bolt had been. Harry lay on the slab, breathing hard, staring at the cavern ceiling. His body was shaking. His skin was still glowing faintly, and the air around him crackled with ambient magic like static electricity. "How do you feel?" Ragnar asked. Harry sat up. He looked at his hands. They were the same hands, still a teenager's hands, still scarred from years of Dursley labor. But the magic flowing through them was a river where a creek had been. He could feel everything. The ley line running beneath Gringotts, deep and ancient and powerful. The wards on the building above, layers upon layers of goblin craftsmanship. The heartbeats of every goblin in the room. The magical signature of every person in Diagon Alley, faint but distinct, like light seen through fog. He could feel Hogwarts. Miles away, sleeping in the Scottish Highlands, its ancient magic stirring in recognition. It knew him. The castle, the grounds, the wards, they were reaching for him like a dog hearing its master's footstep. "I feel," Harry said slowly, "like I've been asleep for 15 years. He swung his legs off the slab and stood. The golden veins in the walls were pulsing in sync with his heartbeat now. The goblin ritualists watched him with expressions that bordered on reverence. "The Lordship rings," Harry said. "I want to claim them. All of them." Ragnarok was already moving. "This way." The vault they entered was not any of the 16 listed on his inheritance document. This was something else, a ceremonial vault, Ragnarok explained, maintained by Gringotts for exactly this purpose. It contained the physical tokens of authority for every noble and ancient house whose line had been deposited with the bank. 16 pedestals. 16 rings. They were arranged in a circle, each pedestal carved from a different stone, each ring glowing with its own particular light. Harry walked among them, and the magic in the room bent toward him like flowers toward the sun. The Potter ring was gold set with a ruby, a griffin rampant etched into its face. Harry picked it up, and it resized instantly to fit his right index finger, and a warmth spread up his arm and settled in his chest. The Peveril ring was silver and ancient, set with a black stone that Harry recognized with a jolt, the Resurrection Stone. The symbol of the Deathly Hallows was carved into its band. It went on his right middle finger, and the warmth deepened. One by one. Ring after ring. Gryffindor, gold and scarlet, practically vibrating with energy. Black, onyx and silver, cold but fiercely loyal. Ravenclaw, sapphire and bronze, and his mind sharpened like a blade being honed. Slytherin, emerald and silver, and he felt the Chamber of Secrets respond, far away, the basilisk's lair acknowledging its new master. Hufflepuff, topaz and black, steady and grounding. Emrys. The ring of Merlin's house. It was simple, a band of white gold with a single diamond that seemed to contain a trapped star. When Harry put it on, he heard a voice whisper in a language he didn't know but somehow understood, "Welcome home, child." Pendragon. Lufay. Flammel. Gaunt. Evans. Aldrich. Wulfric. 16 rings. They couldn't all physically sit on his fingers, and as the last one settled into place, they merged, flowing together like liquid metal, combining into a single ring on his right hand. It was beautiful and impossible, a band that shifted between gold and silver, set with a stone that changed color depending on the angle, now ruby, now sapphire, now emerald, now diamond. Etched into the band were 16 crests, tiny and perfect, rotating slowly around the circumference. Harry held up his hand and looked at the ring that contained 16 houses and 1,000 years of magical history. "The sovereign ring," Ragnarok said quietly. "It has not been worn in over 900 years." The magic in the room, in the bank, shifted. Harry felt it happen. Every ward, every enchantment, every protective spell in Gringotts acknowledged him. Not bowing, exactly. Recognizing. The way a soldier recognizes a flag. "There's one more thing I need before I leave," Harry said. "Name it." "My parents' will. The real one." Ragnarok's expression didn't change, but his eyes glittered. "It is in the Potter Legacy Vault. It was sealed by Dumbledore under his authority as Chief Warlock. That authority," he paused, and this time his smile was unmistakable, "does not supersede a sovereign's. Open it." The Potter Legacy Vault was the second vault ever created at Gringotts, behind only Vault 1, which, Harry was beginning to understand, was probably his as well. The cart ride down was long and fast and passed through caverns that had never seen sunlight, past underground rivers of liquid magic and sleeping dragons the size of houses. The vault door was 20 feet of enchanted steel. It opened at Harry's touch. Inside was, more than gold. More than treasure. This was a family's history. Portraits lined the walls, their inhabitants stirring and whispering as the light entered. Shelves held books, artifacts, weapons. A suit of armor stood in one corner, its surface etched with the Potter crest, and magic rolled off it in waves. But Harry walked past all of it. He went straight to the desk at the center of the vault, an old oak desk, clearly his father's, still scattered with quills and parchment. And sitting in the center of the desk, sealed with wax stamped by the Potter ring, was an envelope. To our son Harry, on his 15th birthday or upon his claiming of the Potter Lordship, whichever comes first. We love you. We're sorry. Read everything. Harry broke the seal with steady hands and pulled out the letter inside. It was his mother's handwriting. He knew it from the few scraps he'd seen, small and neat and slightly rushed, as if her thoughts moved faster than her quill. My darling Harry, if you're reading this, then your father and I are dead, and I need you to understand everything that Dumbledore will have tried to keep from you. You are the last sovereign of magic. Your father's line carries the blood of Emrys, Pendragon, and 7 other houses. My line, and yes, I know they told you I was Muggle-born, and we'll get to that, carries the blood of Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff through the Dagworth and Smith families. The Evans family was not Muggle. We were a magical line that went into hiding during the Grindelwald Wars. Dumbledore knew this. He placed my family under a concealment that made us appear Muggle to all magical detection. Why? Because he discovered the prophecy before it was ever spoken aloud to the public. Not the one about Voldemort. The older one. There is a prophecy, recorded in the Department of Mysteries in 1347, that states, when 16 lines converge in one, the sovereign shall return, and the old order shall be remade. Dumbledore found it as a young man. It became his obsession. He tracked the bloodlines, identified the convergence points, and realized that the Potter and Evans lines were the final pieces. He didn't bring your father and me together, Harry, we fell in love on our own, and that's the one thing he can't claim credit for. But he made sure we were in the same place. He made sure we survived long enough to have you. And then, when the Voldemort prophecy was spoken, he saw his chance, a sovereign child, raised in ignorance, dependent on him, aimed like a weapon at the Dark Lord and then, we believe, meant to die in the confrontation, at which point the sovereign line would be truly extinct, and Dumbledore's control of the wizarding world would be unchallenged. Your father wanted to go public. He wanted to claim your sovereign title at birth and raise you in full knowledge of your heritage. Dumbledore talked him out of it. Too dangerous, he said. Voldemort would target the child specifically. As if Voldemort wasn't already targeting us. If we die, Harry, it will be because we trusted someone who was playing a longer game than we understood. The blood wards Dumbledore will place on you, yes, he told us his plan, framed as, just in case, are not protective. They are suppressive. They are chains disguised as shields. Claim your lordships. Claim your title. Trust the goblins, the sovereign treaties are sacred to them, and they have never broken faith with our line. Trust the Greengrass family, they have served the sovereign for 800 years and their oath is still binding. Trust the Longbottoms, Frank and Alice would die for you, and if they're gone, Neville will stand where they stood. Do not trust Albus Dumbledore. You are not a weapon, my love. You are not a sacrifice. You are the sovereign of magic, and it is time for you to wake up. All our love, forever and beyond, Mum and Dad. P.S. Your father insists I add, give him hell, Prongslet. Harry set the letter down on the desk. His hands were still steady. His eyes were dry. He stood in his family's vault, wearing his family's ring, with his family's letter in his hand, and the rage that filled him was not the hot, destructive anger he'd felt in Dumbledore's office after the third task. This was cold. This was structural. This was the kind of anger that didn't burn, it built. Dumbledore had known what Harry was since before he was born. Had manipulated his parents. Had suppressed his magic, stolen his money, hidden his heritage, and planned for him to die. Not out of malice, Harry could almost see the old man's reasoning, could almost hear the gentle, regretful voice explaining why it was necessary, why the greater good required that one boy be sacrificed. And that was what made it so much worse than simple villainy. Dumbledore believed he was right. He believed he was saving the world. And he'd destroyed Harry's life to do it. Harry read the letter one more time. Then he folded it carefully, put it in his pocket, and walked back to where Ragnarok waited by the vault door. "I need several things," Harry said. "First, I want a full accounting of every asset in every one of my 16 vaults. Second, I want the unauthorized withdrawals documented and prepared for legal challenge. Third, I want the Greengrass family contacted, tell them the sovereign has returned and invokes the old compact. Fourth," he paused. "Fourth?" Ragnarok prompted. "I want a meeting with the Goblin King. The real authority, not just the bank. I know there's a difference." Ragnarok regarded him with those dark, ancient eyes. "There is a difference," he allowed. "And you would be the first wizard in 9 centuries to request such a meeting." A pause. "I will arrange it." In the meantime, he reached into his armor and produced a small, flat stone etched with runes. "A direct communication stone. It connects to my office. Use it for anything you need." Harry took the stone. "Thank you, Ragnarok. For all of this. Do not thank me, Sovereign." The word fell from the goblin's lips like an oath. "The goblins remember what your line did for us. We remember the treaties your ancestors honored when no other wizard would. This is not a favor. This is the settling of a very long overdue account." Harry left Gringotts at noon. He'd walked in a suppressed, ignorant, beaten-down 15-year-old with a split lip and a pocket full of confusion. He walked out something else. The split lip was healed, a side effect of the core unbinding, the goblin healers had told him. Minor injuries simply resolved when magic flowed properly. He was still the same height, still wore the same clothes, still had the same unruly black hair. But the people in Diagon Alley looked at him as he passed, and several of them stopped walking. They couldn't have said why. There was just something in the air around him, a weight, a presence. A witch coming out of Flourish and Blots dropped her shopping bag and put her hand over her heart, and she didn't know why. Harry could feel every magical person in the alley. Not reading their thoughts, nothing so invasive. Just, awareness. He knew where they were, what their general emotional state was, how strong their magic ran. It was like echolocation, except the echoes were made of magic. He could feel Dumbledore, too. Far away, in Scotland, a tight knot of powerful magic wrapped around a core of genuine panic. The old man knew. Maybe he'd felt the bindings break. Maybe the redirected mail had appeared. Either way, Dumbledore knew something had changed, and Harry could feel him reaching out, trying to locate Harry through channels that no longer existed. "Good luck with that, old man." Harry walked back into the leaky cauldron. Tom looked up, and his eyes went wide. "Mr. Potter, I'll be checking out, Tom. But I need to use your flu first." Of course, Harry took a pinch of flu powder, stepped into the fireplace, and spoke clearly, "Potter Manor." Green flames erupted around him, and the world spun, and then it stopped, and Harry was standing in a fireplace the size of a small room, in a hall that took his breath away. Potter Manor was vast. Not ostentatiously so, not like the marble monstrosity he imagined Malfoy Manor to be. It was old. It was deeply old. Stone walls hung with tapestries that moved gently in a non-existent breeze. Wooden beams carved with protective runes. Windows of stained glass that cast colored light across a flagstone floor worn smooth by centuries of Potter footsteps. And the magic. God, the magic. The house was saturated with it, layers upon layers of enchantment and protection laid down by generations of his family. But it was sleeping, dormant, like a fire banked for the night. No one had lived here in 14 years, and the manor had been waiting. Harry pressed his hand flat against the stone wall. "I'm home," he said. The manor woke. There was no other word for it. The fire in the great hearth roared to life. The candles in their iron brackets burst into flame. The tapestries rippled as if in a strong wind, and the colored light from the windows intensified until the hall blazed with color. Deep in the walls, Harry felt the house wards engage, layer after layer, ancient and modern, goblin-wrought and wizard-cast, snapping into place around the property like a fortress sealing its gates. Somewhere in the upper floors, a house elf shrieked with joy. 3 of them appeared in the hall with simultaneous pops, 2 males and a female, all wearing clean pillowcases embroidered with the Potter crest. They were weeping openly. "Master Harry," the eldest cried, throwing himself at Harry's feet. "Master Harry has come home." Mipsy knew. Mipsy always said Master Harry would come home. "Hello, Mipsy," Harry said, and he was smiling for the first time in weeks. "I take it you've been looking after the place." 15 years, Master Harry. Mipsy and Topper and Fern have kept the manor perfect. Every room dusted, every ward maintained, just as Mistress Lily instructed. Harry's chest ached. His mother had given them instructions. She'd planned for this. "You've done brilliantly," he said. "All 3 of you. Now, I need the master study, and I need every piece of correspondence that's arrived at this address in the last 14 years. Mipsy snapped his fingers. A door at the far end of the hall swung open, revealing a corridor lined with portraits of Potters past. They were all awake, all watching him, and as Harry walked through them, they began to applaud. Not politely, fiercely. Charles Potter, who Harry recognized from his vault's portrait collection, was openly weeping. Doria Potternay Black was standing tall with her chin raised, pride blazing in her painted eyes. "About damn time," said the portrait of Fleamont Potter, who Harry was fairly sure was his grandfather. Lily said it'd be 15 years. "I bet Charles 20 galleons it'd be 10. Stubborn boy, making me lose a bet to my own father." Harry grinned up at him. "Sorry, grandfather." "Don't be sorry, lad. Be magnificent." The master study was exactly what Harry needed, a large, comfortable room with a desk the size of a dining table, shelves of books, a fireplace, and windows overlooking grounds that stretched to the horizon. Rolling hills, ancient forest, a lake that sparkled in the afternoon sun. The Potter estate was massive. Harry sat behind the desk. It felt right. The chair adjusted to him, the desk's surface cleared itself, and a fresh quill and inkwell appeared at his right hand. The house was anticipating his needs. He placed the communication stone Ragnarok had given him on the desk. He put his parents' letter beside it. Then he pulled out a fresh sheet of parchment and began to write. 3 letters. The first was to Neville Longbottom. It was short and direct. "Neville. Something's happened that changes everything. I need you at Potter Manor as soon as possible. Come alone. Trust no one with where you're going. Harry." The second was to Sirius Black, care of wherever the man was hiding, Padfoot. "I know the truth now. All of it. About what I am, what Dumbledore did, everything. I need my godfather. Potter Manor is open and warded. Come home. Harry. P.S. You're also looking at the new Lord Black." The third letter took longer. Harry wrote it with care, choosing every word with precision. "To the most ancient and noble house of Greengrass. The sovereign of magic has returned. The old compact is invoked. I request a meeting at your earliest convenience, at Potter Manor, to discuss the renewal of our alliance. With respect and in honor of 8 centuries of faithful service, Harry James Potter, Sovereign of Magic, Lord of 16 Houses." He sealed each letter with the sovereign ring, pressing it into hot wax. The seal that formed was intricate and unmistakable, 16 crests arranged around a central symbol that Harry instinctively knew was the mark of the sovereign. Anyone who knew their magical heraldry would recognize it immediately. "Hedwig," he called, and his owl swooped in through the open window as if she'd been waiting. "3 deliveries, girl. The Longbottom one first, make sure Neville gets it personally. Hedwig hooted, took the letters, and vanished into the afternoon sky. Harry leaned back in his chair. The sovereign ring pulsed gently on his finger, warm and alive. Through it, he could feel the full scope of what he now controlled. 16 vaults full of gold, artifacts, and knowledge. Properties across Britain and beyond. Political seats that would reshape the Wizengamot. Ancient alliances with races the Ministry had spent centuries marginalizing. And a magical core that was still expanding, still settling into its unbound state, still growing toward a ceiling he couldn't yet see. He was 15 years old, and he was the most powerful person in magical Britain. The thought should have terrified him. It didn't. What terrified him, what had always terrified him, was powerlessness. The cupboard. The ignorance. The feeling of being moved around a chessboard by someone else's hand. That was over now. Harry pulled the stack of old correspondence toward him, 14 years of intercepted letters that had finally found their way home. He began to read. Invitations to social events. Business proposals. Alliance requests. Condolences for his parents. A letter from Nicholas Flamel, dated 1992, designating Harry as his heir and expressing bewildered frustration that his previous 6 letters had gone unanswered. A letter from Amelia Bones, head of the DMLE, dated 1991, requesting a meeting to discuss his parents' estate and expressing concern about irregularities in the guardianship filings. 14 years of a life stolen from him, laid out in ink and parchment. Through the windows, the sun was beginning to set over the Potter estate. The sky turned gold and crimson, and the lake caught fire with reflected light. Harry read letter after letter, building a picture of the world that should have been his, the relationships he should have had, the knowledge he should have possessed. And somewhere in Scotland, in a tower office at Hogwarts, Albus Dumbledore sat surrounded by 14 years of returned mail, his monitoring instruments shattered, his tracking charms dissolved, his carefully constructed web of control unraveling thread by thread, and felt, for the first time in a very long life, the cold grip of genuine fear. The Sovereign was awake. And he was angry. Chapter 2, The Gathering Storm. The sunset bled out over Potter Manor's grounds, painting the lake in shades of copper and wine, and Harry didn't sleep that night. He didn't need to. Whatever the Goblin ritual had done to his magical core, whatever 15 years of suppression had cost him, his body was compensating now with a furious vitality that made sleep feel like a waste of time. So he read. The correspondence pile was enormous. 14 years of stolen letters created a paper mountain on the study desk, and Harry worked through them methodically, sorting them into categories. Political overtures. Financial inquiries. Personal letters. Legal notices. Each one was a thread in a web he'd never known existed, and as the hours passed and the candles burned low and Mipsy silently replaced them, a picture emerged that was both more complex and more infuriating than Harry had imagined. Dumbledore hadn't just hidden Harry's heritage. He'd actively dismantled the political infrastructure the Potter family had built over centuries. Alliance requests from the Greengrass, Longbottom, Bones, Abbott, and Davis families, all unanswered, all interpreted as deliberate snubs. Business partnerships dissolved through inaction. Charitable foundations quietly defunded. The Potter seat on the Wizengamot, which should have been held in trust by a regent of Harry's choosing, had instead been claimed as a proxy vote by Dumbledore himself. 16 seats. Harry kept coming back to that number. With all his lordships, he controlled 16 Wizengamot seats. Dumbledore had been using them all, through proxies, through procedural manipulation, through the simple fact that no one knew they belonged to anyone else, to steer magical Britain's government for 14 years. By 3 in the morning, Harry had a list. He'd written it on a fresh sheet of parchment in his mother's desk, using his father's quill, and it contained every action he intended to take in the next 72 hours. It was detailed, precise, and ruthless. He was reviewing it for the 3rd time when the ward stone in the corner of the study pulsed blue. Someone's at the boundary, Harry murmured. He could feel it through the ring, a magical signature approaching the estate's outer wards, familiar and canine and slightly frantic. He smiled. Let him through. The wards parted, and 3 minutes later, the study door burst open and Sirius Black staggered in looking like he'd run the entire way from wherever he'd been hiding. He was thin, wild-haired, wearing robes that had seen better decades, and his eyes were blazing. "Harry, what, your letter, Lord Black? What in the name of Merlin Saggy, sit down, Sirius." Sirius sat, more from shock than obedience. He stared at Harry across the desk, and Harry watched his godfather take in the changes, the healed lip, the faded scar, the sovereign ring, the quiet authority that filled the room like a low hum. Sirius's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "You look like your father," he said hoarsely. "But more. You look like, I don't know what you look like." "I look like me," Harry said. "The real me. The one Dumbledore spent 15 years trying to make sure never existed." He told Sirius everything. The blood test, the Lordships, the bindings, the Horcrux, the financial theft, the letter from his parents. He spoke for 20 minutes without interruption, his voice level and precise, and watched Sirius's face cycle through shock, confusion, rage, grief, and finally a cold, hard fury that mirrored Harry's own. When Harry finished, Sirius was gripping the arms of his chair hard enough to creak the wood. "James told me," Sirius whispered. "Not everything, not the sovereign part. But he told me, right before they went into hiding, that Dumbledore had done something to you. Something to your magic. He said he was going to confront him about it. That was 3 days before," his voice broke. 3 days before they died. The room was very quiet. "I need you free, Sirius," Harry said. "Not hiding, not on the run, legally exonerated. The Lord Black title passed to me through your designation, but with you alive, the proper arrangement is for you to be regent until I formally claim it at majority. More importantly, I need my godfather standing beside me when I walk into the Wizengamot." "How?" "I never got a trial, Harry. Crouch threw me straight into Azkaban. You never got a trial because Dumbledore let it happen. He was chief warlock. He could have demanded one. He didn't because a free Sirius Black would have taken custody of me, and his entire plan required me at the Dursleys under his suppression wards." Sirius flinched as if he'd been struck. "I have evidence of Pettigrew's survival from the events of my 3rd year," Harry continued. "I have a sovereign's authority to demand a trial for any citizen of magical Britain. And I have 16 Wizengamot seats that are about to make a lot of people very uncomfortable. You'll have your trial within the week." Sirius stared at him. Then, slowly, a grin spread across his gaunt face, the reckless, defiant, slightly mad grin of Sirius Black, the man who'd laughed in the face of 12 years in Azkaban. "Prongs would be so bloody proud of you right now." "I know." Harry's voice was soft for just a moment. Then it firmed. "Guest rooms down the hall. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Sirius stood, but he didn't leave. He walked around the desk, and before Harry could react, pulled him into a fierce, crushing hug. Harry let himself be held. Just for a moment. Just long enough to feel what it was like to have family. "Thank you for coming," Harry said into his godfather's shoulder. "Kid, you could have told me you were opening a florist shop in Nocturne Alley and I'd have come. You're all I've got." "Not anymore. Now go sleep. You look terrible." Sirius barked a laugh, the first real laugh Harry had heard from him in a year, and left the study. Harry turned back to his list. Dawn came in grey and gold, and with it came Hedwig, sailing through the study window with 2 letters in her talons. She landed on the desk with an imperious hoot and stuck out her leg. The first letter was from Neville. The handwriting was shaky, as if he'd written it in a hurry. "Harry, I don't know what's happening, but I trust you. I'll be there by noon. Gran is asking questions I don't know how to answer. Neville the second letter bore the greengrass seal, a serpent coiled around a winter rose, pressed in silver wax. The parchment was heavy, expensive, and the handwriting was elegant and controlled. To His Grace, the Sovereign of Magic, House Greengrass receives your invocation with profound honor. Lord Cyrus Greengrass and his eldest daughter, Daphne, will attend upon you at Potter Manor at 10 o'clock this morning. The ancient compact is remembered and held sacred. We have waited long for this day. Cyrus Greengrass, Lord of the ancient House of Greengrass. Harry checked the time. 7:30. 2.5 hours. He stood, stretched, and for the first time took a proper look at himself. He was still wearing yesterday's clothes, Dudley's cast-offs, 3 sizes too large, stained and fraying. That wouldn't do. Not for what today was. Mipsy. The elf appeared instantly. Master Harry? Is there a wardrobe in this house? Robes, formal wear. Mipsy's eyes lit up. Master James's wardrobe is in the master bedroom, sir. Mistress Lily preserved everything with permanent stasis charms. And, the elf hesitated, ears twitching with excitement. There is the sovereign's wardrobe, sir. In the lower gallery. No potter has opened it in many generations, but Mipsy believes it would open for you. Show me. The lower gallery was a long, vaulted room beneath the main hall, lit by enchanted windows that showed a perpetual starfield. Glass cases lined the walls, containing artifacts and regalia from every era of the Potter line. And at the far end, behind a door that responded to the touch of Harry's ring, was the sovereign's wardrobe. It wasn't a closet. It was an armory. Battle robes hung in neat rows, dragonhide and basilisk skin and materials Harry couldn't identify, all enchanted, all in perfect condition despite their age. Formal robes in midnight blue and deep black, trimmed with gold and silver thread that formed the crests of every sovereign house. Casual wear that managed to look both comfortable and authoritative. Boots, gloves, cloaks with hoods that Harry somehow knew would shadow the wearer's face in any light. Harry ran his hand along the nearest set of battle robes, black dragon hide, supple as silk, with the sovereign crest worked in silver thread across the back. The magic in them was dense and layered. Protective enchantments, environmental adaptation, self-repair. Goblin made, he realized. A gift from some ancient goblin king to some ancient sovereign. He chose carefully. For today, for the political meetings ahead, he selected formal robes in deep charcoal, that cut clean and modern despite their age. The enchantments adjusted them to his frame perfectly. Over them, a cloak of midnight blue with a silver clasp shaped like the sovereign seal. The effect was immediate. He looked at himself in the enchanted mirror and saw not a skinny 15-year-old boy but someone who belonged in a room full of power. Master Harry looks like a proper lord, Mipsy said, dabbing his eyes with a corner of his pillowcase. Harry clasped the elf's bony shoulder. That's because I am one. Now, breakfast for 5, in the formal dining room. Set it for 10 o'clock. The Greengrasses arrived precisely on time, stepping through the floor in Potter Manor's entrance hall at 10 o'clock sharp. Cyrus Greengrass was a tall, lean man in his mid-40s, with iron-gray hair and the kind of face that gave nothing away. He wore impeccable dark robes and carried a walking stick that Harry could tell was actually a concealed wand, not for disability, but for the political advantage of appearing unarmed while being anything but. His eyes swept the hall, took in the awakened wards, the blazing hearth, the Potter ancestors watching from their frames, and a muscle twitched in his jaw. His daughter was something else entirely. Daphne Greengrass was Harry's age. He knew that from Hogwarts, where she'd been a quiet, cold presence in Slytherin robes for 4 years, never part of Malfoy's crowd, never part of anyone's crowd. She had her father's sharp features softened by her mother's influence, dark blonde hair pulled back severely, and blue eyes that assessed everything they touched with the precision of a gem cutter evaluating stones. She wore robes of deep green and silver, and she moved with the particular self-possession of someone who'd been trained in formal etiquette since birth. She was, Harry realized with some surprise, quite beautiful. Not in the obvious way that made boys trip over themselves, in a sharp, architectural way that you had to be paying attention to notice. He was paying attention. Cyrus Greengrass stopped 3 paces from Harry and bowed. Not a polite social bow, a deep, formal obeisance, one hand over his heart. Beside him, Daphne curtsied low, her eyes never leaving Harry's face. "Your Grace," Cyrus said. "House Greengrass answers the call." Harry inclined his head. "Lord Greengrass. Miss Greengrass. Thank you for coming so quickly. Rise, please, I don't stand on ceremony more than necessary." Cyrus straightened, and Harry saw something shift behind his eyes, a recalculation. Whatever the man had expected from the 15-year-old sovereign, this wasn't it. "Shall we?" Harry gestured toward the dining room. "I've had breakfast prepared, and we have a great deal to discuss." The formal dining room in Potter Manor could seat 40. Harry had set the table for 5, himself at the head, 2 places on each side. The food was already laid out, a full English, silver service, fresh orange juice and tea. Mipsy had outdone himself. They sat. Harry poured tea himself, a deliberate choice that wasn't lost on Cyrus, whose eyebrow rose a fraction. "I'm going to be direct, Lord Greengrass," Harry said. "I invoked the old compact because my mother's letter told me to trust your house. But trust isn't inherited. I'd like to hear from you why I should." A small silence. Daphne's teacup paused halfway to her lips, and her eyes sharpened. Cyrus set down his own cup and nodded slowly. "A fair question. Directly answered, then." He leaned forward slightly. "The Greengrass family has served the sovereign line for 812 years, since Aldrich Greengrass swore the oath to your ancestor Edmund Pendragon Emrys during the Goblin Rebellion of 1183. That oath is not symbolic. It is magically binding, a blood oath that passes from parent to child. I feel it now, sitting in your presence. It is," he paused, searching for the word. "Comfortable. Like a joint clicking back into place. The oath compels loyalty. It compels nothing. That is why it has endured. The sovereign compact was never about compulsion, it was about mutual obligation. We serve, and in return, the sovereign protects. Our family has prospered under that arrangement for 8 centuries, even through the long absence. We maintained our position, our wealth, our political connections, all in preparation for this day." "What position, exactly?" "I know the Greengrass name, but you've always been quiet. In the background." Cyrus smiled thinly. "By design. We control approximately 15% of the Wisengamot's swing votes through marriage alliances and economic leverage. We own the largest private potion supply chain in Britain. We have intelligence networks in the ministry that would make the unspeakable weep with jealousy. And we have done all of this while maintaining a public profile so neutral that most people think we're merely wealthy and boring." "You've been building an infrastructure," Harry said. "For me. For whoever eventually claimed the sovereign title. For 800 years. Yes." Harry looked at Daphne, who had been silent throughout. She met his gaze steadily, and there was nothing submissive in it. This wasn't a girl who'd been brought along as decoration. "And you, Miss Greengrass? You've spent 4 years at Hogwarts without once indicating you knew anything about this. That's impressive self-control for an 11-year-old. Something flickered across Daphne's face, surprise, maybe, at being addressed directly. Or at being acknowledged as someone worth addressing. "I was instructed to observe and wait," she said. Her voice was cool and precise, with a faint melodic quality underneath the ice. "My father told me when I was 9 years old what I was, what our family's purpose was, and that the sovereign would likely emerge during my generation. My job at Hogwarts was to watch you. And what did you observe?" She set down her teacup. "That you were being systematically isolated, manipulated, and weakened. That Dumbledore controlled every variable in your life. That you were more powerful than you should have been even with the suppression, which terrified me, frankly, because it meant the bindings were straining. That you were brave to the point of stupidity, loyal to people who didn't always deserve it, and had absolutely no idea what you were. Her tone was clinical but not unkind. She was giving a field report, and she was giving it honestly. I also observed, she added, that you were kind. Consistently, stubbornly kind, even when it cost you. That mattered to me. Power without kindness is just Voldemort with better branding. The room was quiet for a beat. Harry held her gaze. I think we're going to get along, Miss Greengrass. Daphne. If I'm going to be working with you, we can dispense with the formality. Harry, then. Absolutely not. A ghost of a smile. You're the sovereign of magic. I'll call you Harry in private. In public, your grace, until the political landscape is stable enough that informality won't be mistaken for weakness. Harry blinked, then laughed, a genuine, surprised laugh that felt strange and good. You've been thinking about this for a while. 6 years. I have plans. Would you like to hear them? Before Harry could answer, the ward stone pulsed again. A new magical signature at the boundary, warm, strong, slightly nervous. That'll be Neville, Harry said. Mipsy, let him through. Neville Longbottom walked into Potter Manor looking like a man who'd wandered into a dream and wasn't sure whether it was a good one. He was taller than Harry remembered, summer growth spurts, and he'd lost some of the roundness in his face, revealing features that were starting to look quite a lot like the photographs of Frank Longbottom. But he still moved with that particular Neville uncertainty, as if apologizing to the floor for stepping on it. That was about to change. Harry. Neville said, stopping in the entrance hall and staring. What happened to you? A lot. Come sit down. Are you hungry? What? No. Harry, your letter, what's going on? And where are we? This place is, he looked up at the vaulted ceiling, the ancestral portraits, the sheer presence of the manor. This is Potter Manor. I thought it was lost. It was hidden. Like a lot of things. Harry guided him to the dining room, where Cyrus and Daphne waited. Neville saw Daphne and froze. Greengrass? What? Sit down, Neville. He sat. Harry told the story again, shorter this time, more focused. He watched Neville's face as the revelations hit, one after another. The blood test. The Lordships. The sovereign title. The bindings. Dumbledore. By the end of it, Neville's hands were flat on the table and his eyes were wide and dark. My parents, Neville said. His voice was barely above a whisper. You said your mum's letter mentioned them. That they would have stood with you. She said Frank and Alice would die for me. I believe her. The Longbottom family has an oath to the sovereign line, Neville. Different from the Greengrass oath, military, not political. The Longbottoms were the sovereign's war commanders. Neville's jaw tightened. My parents were tortured into insanity when I was a baby. The Lestranges were looking for information about the sovereign, Cyrus said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. The older man's expression was grave. I'm sorry, Mr. Longbottom. I've suspected this for years but had no way to confirm it until now. The Lestranges were Voldemort's inner circle. If he had any inkling of the sovereign prophecy, Frank and Alice, as the sovereign's sworn protectors, would have been primary targets for interrogation. The color drained from Neville's face. Then it came back, flooding in hot and fierce, and something happened that Harry had never seen before. Neville Longbottom's magic flared. A wave of raw power rippled out from him, rattling the silverware and making the candle flames bow sideways. It was uncontrolled, emotional, and shockingly strong. Daphne's hand moved to her wand. Harry raised a palm, stopping her. Neville, he said. Look at me. Neville's eyes found his. You're strong, Harry said. Stronger than you know. And I think you've been suppressed too, maybe not as deliberately as me, but the Longbottom magic responds to the sovereign bond, and without a sovereign to anchor to, it's been dormant. You've spent your whole life thinking you were barely a wizard. Gran said, my family thought, they were wrong. Everyone was wrong about both of us. Neville's magic steadied. The silverware stopped rattling. He looked at Harry with an expression that was fragile and fierce at the same time. What do you need me to do? Stand with me. Not as a follower, as a commander. Your family's role. The war that's coming isn't just against Voldemort. It's against an entire power structure that's been rotting from the inside for decades. I need someone I trust absolutely to lead the military side of things. I'm 15. I can barely. You dueled Death Eaters in the Department of Mysteries in a timeline that hasn't happened yet, Harry said, then stopped. That wasn't right, that was a future that had been planned for him, a prophecy Dumbledore had been steering toward. Never mind that. Neville, I watched you stand up to 3 older students in our first year because you thought we were breaking rules. You tried to fight Malfoy over a remembrall. You have never once, in 4 years, backed down when it mattered. The courage isn't the problem. You've just never been given a direction to point it in. Neville stared at him. Then he straightened in his chair, and the uncertain hunch in his shoulders eased, just a fraction. Okay, he said. I'm in. Harry looked around the table. Sirius, who'd entered quietly during the conversation and was leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed and a fierce pride on his gaunt face. Cyrus Greengrass, calculating and committed. Daphne, whose cool mask had cracked just enough to show something that looked like hope. Neville, terrified and resolute. 4 people. It wasn't an army. It wasn't even a proper council. But it was a start. Right, Harry said. Let's talk about the Wizengamot. Daphne took the lead, and Harry let her, because within 3 minutes it became obvious that she'd been preparing for this conversation since she was old enough to understand what the Wizengamot was. She conjured a floating diagram above the table, a web of names, family crests, and connection lines that looked like a conspiracy theorist's bedroom wall, except organized with surgical precision. The Wizengamot has 147 seated members, she said, using her wand to highlight sections of the web. 50 are hereditary seats tied to noble houses. 50 are appointed by the minister. 47 are elected by the general magical population. The chief warlock, currently Dumbledore, casts tie-breaking votes and controls the procedural calendar. Harry's 16 lordships give him 16 hereditary seats, Cyrus added. That's nearly a third of the hereditary block by itself. But it's not enough for a majority, Harry said. Not alone, no. Dumbledore's faction controls roughly 60 seats through a combination of appointed members loyal to him and hereditary houses he's cultivated over decades, the Weasleys, the Diggorys, several minor houses. Fudge controls another 30 through ministry appointments. The Dark faction, Malfoy, Nott, Parkinson, the usual suspects, holds about 25. That leaves roughly 30 seats that are genuinely independent or swing votes. My father controls 12 of those swing votes through our alliance network, Daphne said. With your 16 and our 12, we have 28. We need 47 more for a simple majority, or 74 for the 2/3 needed to pass constitutional changes. Constitutional changes like removing the chief warlock? Sirius asked from the doorframe. Among other things. Daphne's smile was thin and sharp. But we don't need a 2/3 majority for the first strike. We need a simple majority for exactly one thing, a motion to audit all proxy votes cast in the last 15 years. If that motion passes, every vote Dumbledore cast using Harry's seats becomes invalid. 15 years of legislation, appointments, and policy decisions, all tainted. Harry leaned forward. That's chaos. That's leverage, Daphne countered. We don't actually want the audit to go through. We want the threat of it. Once Dumbledore's faction realizes their entire legislative record could be unwound, half of them will jump ship to avoid being caught in the fallout. We pick up those defectors, and suddenly we don't need the audit anymore because we've already got the majority. Cyrus was watching his daughter with an expression that blended pride with something like awe. Harry suspected the older man had underestimated her. When is the next Wizengomot session? Harry asked. Tomorrow afternoon, Cyrus said. Emergency session, called by Fudge, nominally to discuss increased security measures in light of the Triwizard Tournament disaster. Actually to push through a new defense educational decree that would give the Ministry the right to appoint teachers at Hogwarts. Umbridge, Daphne said flatly. Yes. Dolores Umbridge. Fudge wants her at Hogwarts as a loyalist and a spy. Harry felt the sovereign ring pulse on his finger. Through his connection to Hogwarts, faint but growing, he felt the castle's wards shiver with displeasure. Even the building didn't want Umbridge there. Then tomorrow afternoon is when we move, Harry said. No warnings. No advance notice. I walk in, claim my seats, and we see what happens. Neville swallowed. That's going to be a mess. Good. I want it messy. Dumbledore's power depends on control, on managing information, on keeping everyone playing the game by his rules. The moment things get chaotic, his advantage disappears. Harry looked at Daphne. Can you have a legal brief prepared by tomorrow? Full documentation of the proxy fraud, ready to present. It's already written. She reached into her robes and produced a scroll of parchment 6 inches thick, tied with a green ribbon. I've been updating it annually since I was 12. Harry took the scroll, hefted it, and shook his head. You've been preparing for this your entire life. So have you. You just didn't know it. The rest of the day was preparation. Cyrus departed to activate his network, quiet messages to allied houses, subtle inquiries about tomorrow's session, a carefully worded tip to the Daily Prophet that something unprecedented would occur at the Wizengomot. Not enough to reveal what was coming, but enough to ensure maximum press coverage. Neville stayed. Harry took him down to the Manor's training hall, a cavernous room in the basement with enchanted walls that could withstand anything short of fiendfire, and they dueled. It was, in some ways, the most revealing hour of Harry's day. With his core unbound, Harry's magic was almost absurdly powerful. Spells that had required full concentration and careful wand movement now leapt from his wand at a thought. A stupefy that should have been a bolt of red light was instead a wave, a wall of force that swept across the training hall and would have flattened a dozen opponents. His shield charms were physical things, visible and solid, humming with energy. And when he cast a Patronus, more out of curiosity than need, the silver stag that erupted from his wand was the size of a horse, burning with white fire, and the training hall filled with a warmth so intense that Neville actually laughed out loud. But the real revelation was Neville. Stripped of his fear, given a target and permission to fight, the boy was dangerous. His spells lacked Harry's raw power, but they were fast, creative, and relentless. He fought like his parents. Harry could see it, though he'd never seen Frank or Alice in action. There was a Longbottom style, aggressive and grounded, and Neville had it in his bones. You've been holding back your whole life, Harry told him after Neville landed a bludgeoning hex that actually cracked Harry's shield, a feat that, given how strong Harry's shields now were, was genuinely impressive. I was scared, Neville admitted, wiping sweat from his face. Of magic. Of being bad at it. Of being a disappointment. Your Gran's wand. Neville blinked. What? You're using your father's wand. That's why your magic is inconsistent, the wand didn't choose you. How much do you want to bet Augusta Longbottom insisted you carry it for sentimental reasons? Neville stared at the wand in his hand. I never thought, first thing tomorrow morning, before the Wizengomot session, we're getting you a wand of your own. One that's yours. And Neville, Harry caught his eye. When it chooses you, you're going to feel the difference. And you're never going to doubt yourself again. Neville nodded slowly. His grip on his father's wand shifted, still respectful, but no longer desperate. Thank you, Harry. Don't thank me. Just be ready for tomorrow. Daphne found Harry on the manor's north terrace at sunset. He was standing at the balustrade, looking out over the grounds, feeling the ley line that ran beneath the estate pulse in time with his heartbeat. The evening air was warm and smelled of cut grass and wild thyme. You should be sleeping, she said, coming to stand beside him. Can't. Too wired. Then you should at least be reviewing the legal brief. I read it twice while you were all at dinner. It's brilliant, by the way. 12-year-old you was a terrifying legal mind. 13-year-old me was worse. I went through a phase where I drafted impeachment proceedings against Fudge for fun. She leaned against the balustrade and looked at him sideways. Are you all right? That's a complicated question. I know. I'm asking it anyway. Harry was quiet for a moment. Below them, the lake reflected the first stars, and an owl that wasn't Hedwig drifted across the water like a ghost. Yesterday morning I was lying on a bed at Privet Drive with a split lip, and I didn't know who I was, he said. Tonight I'm standing on a terrace of a manor I own, wearing a ring that represents 1,000 years of magical authority, planning to walk into the Wizengamot tomorrow and essentially declare war on the most powerful wizard in Britain. He paused. I'm not all right. But I'm not lost, either. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. She turned to face him fully. In the fading light, her features were softer than they were by day, the sharp political operator giving way to a teenage girl who was also shouldering a weight she hadn't asked for. For what it's worth, you're handling this better than any model I'd constructed. You modeled this? My reaction? I modeled 12 different scenarios for the Sovereign's emergence. In 6 of them, the Sovereign was overwhelmed and retreated. In 3, they were co-opted by existing power structures. In 2, they went dark, power corruption, the usual. Only one scenario had the Sovereign respond with the kind of cold, strategic clarity you've shown today. And what was that scenario called? A pause. Then, very quietly, the one where it works. They stood together on the terrace as night settled over Potter Manor, and neither of them spoke for a while, and the silence was comfortable. The Wizengamot session starts at 2 o'clock, Daphne said finally. I'll have Father's allies primed and positioned by noon. Neville should be in battle robes, formal, but a visible reminder that you have military backing. Sirius should not attend. Agreed. Not until his trial. I'll stand to your right. In the old protocols, the Sovereign's right hand is the political advisor. People who know their history, and several Wizengamot members do, will understand the signal. Harry looked at her. You've been waiting for this your whole life. How does it feel now that it's here? Daphne considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Terrifying, she said. Exhilarating. I'd always imagined the Sovereign as someone older, someone I'd be advising from a respectful distance. Instead I've got a classmate who duels like a war god and makes his own tea. It's not what I expected. Better or worse? Ask me tomorrow night. If we survive the Wizengamot without starting a civil war, I'll upgrade my assessment. Harry grinned. Deal. Daphne turned to go back inside, then paused at the terrace door. Harry. I thought it was, Your Grace, in public. We're not in public. And I wanted to say, she hesitated, which seemed deeply uncharacteristic. I watched you for 4 years. I saw what they did to you. The isolation, the lies, the way they made you doubt yourself year after year. I couldn't do anything about it, and her jaw tightened. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Watching and waiting while they broke you down. They didn't break me. No. They didn't. And that's why this is going to work. Good night, Harry. She disappeared inside, and Harry turned back to the night sky and breathed. Morning came fast and sharp. Harry woke to find Hedwig on the headboard and a note from Ragnarok on the nightstand, delivered by Goblin courier in the small hours. Sovereign, the Goblin King has agreed to meet. 3 days hence. Prepare for a journey underground. Additionally, the financial audit is complete. Enclosed is a summary. The full documentation runs to 4,200 pages and is available at your convenience. Ragnarok. The summary was devastating. Dumbledore had not merely been skimming from Harry's vault. He'd been running a shadow economy, redirecting Potter funds to finance the Order of the Phoenix, to bribe ministry officials, to fund research projects at Hogwarts, to pay off debts owed by families he wanted to keep loyal. The Weasley payments were a small part of it. Mundungus Fletcher had received regular stipends. Several Hogwarts professors had been supplemented with Potter gold without their knowledge, their official Hogwarts salaries topped up by invisible deposits. Even Remus Lupin, Harry noted with a pang, had received monthly payments listed as charitable disbursement, though knowing Remus, the man had no idea where the money came from. Dumbledore had built his entire power base on the bones of the Potter fortune. Harry rolled the summary into a tight scroll and added it to the documentation Daphne had prepared. Then he dressed, formal robes again, the midnight blue cloak, the sovereign ring prominently displayed, and went downstairs. Neville was already in the entrance hall, looking uncomfortable in borrowed Potter robes that Mipsy had adjusted overnight. Harry, I can't wear these. They're perfect. You look like a Longbottom. I look like I'm going to a funeral. We might be. Depends on how Dumbledore takes it. Harry clapped his shoulder. Wand first. Let's go. They fled to Diagon Alley and went straight to Ollivander's. The wand-maker's shop was dusty and silver-lit and exactly as Harry remembered it, and Ollivander himself emerged from the stacks looking simultaneously ancient and ageless. Mr. Potter, Ollivander said, and then stopped. His pale eyes, eerie, knowing eyes, went wide. Oh. Oh, my. The bindings are gone. The core is, he swallowed. Remarkable. I need a wand for my friend, Harry said, stepping aside. Neville Longbottom. Ollivander's gaze shifted to Neville, and something in his expression sharpened. Longbottom. Using Frank's wand, are you? Neville flinched. Yes, sir. Brave of Augusta, sentimental of Augusta, but utterly foolish of Augusta. Come here, boy. Let's find yours. It took 20 minutes. Neville tried wand after wand, cherry and unicorn hair, sneezed violently, elm and phoenix feather, shattered a window, ash and dragon heartstring, set a shelf on fire. But when Ollivander, with a knowing smile, pulled a long, dark wand from the very back of the shop and placed it in Neville's hand, the world changed. Cherry wood, 13 inches, with a core of thunderbird tail feather. The wand didn't just choose Neville, it sang. A pulse of magic erupted from the tip, golden and warm, and every wand box in the shop rattled in its shelf, and Neville gasped, and his eyes went wide, and Harry watched the boy stand straighter than he ever had in his life. There, Ollivander whispered. There you are, Mr. Longbottom. I've been keeping that wand for 30 years, wondering who it was waiting for. Thunderbird feather, wild magic, storm magic. A warrior's wand. Neville stared at the wand in his hand. His eyes were bright. It feels right, Harry finished. I know. They left Ollivander's and headed straight for the Ministry of Magic. The Ministry atrium at 1:30 in the afternoon was crowded, witches and wizards streaming to and from the lifts, interdepartmental memos swooping overhead like paper birds, the great fountain of magical brethren splashing at the center. Harry walked through it all with Neville at his left and Daphne at his right. She'd been waiting for them at the visitors' entrance, dressed in robes of deep emerald that made her look like she'd stepped out of a political portrait. People stared. Conversations stuttered and died. Harry felt the whispers ripple outward like a stone dropped in still water. Is that Potter? What's he wearing? What's that ring? Why is he with the Greengrass girl? He didn't slow down. Didn't acknowledge the attention. He walked with the focused purpose of someone who had every right to be there and everyone else could adjust accordingly. Security barely processed them. Harry pressed his wand to the checkpoint sensor, and the security wizard's eyes nearly fell out of his head when the readout came back. He opened his mouth, thought better of it, and waved them through. The Wizengamot chamber was in the lowest levels of the ministry, accessed by a dedicated lift that descended into the bedrock of London. The lift doors opened onto a corridor lined with black marble, lit by floating orbs of white fire, and at the end of the corridor were the great double doors of the chamber itself, ancient oak, 20 feet high, carved with the crests of every noble house. 2 Aurors stood guard. Harry recognized neither of them, but they recognized him. Their eyes locked on the sovereign ring and their training kicked in, snapping them to attention. "We're here for the session," Harry said. "Lord Potter and guests. The session is restricted to seated members and, I am a seated member. 16 times over. Open the doors." The Auror's mouth worked. He looked at his partner. His partner shrugged, very slightly. They opened the doors. The Wizengamot chamber was a vast circular amphitheater, tiered benches rising on all sides around a central floor. The benches were filling, 147 members taking their seats, plus aides, scribes, and a press gallery packed with reporters. The ceiling was enchanted to show a slowly rotating star map, and the acoustics were such that a whisper at the center could be heard clearly at the highest tier. Harry walked down the central aisle toward the floor. He felt the moment Dumbledore saw him. The old man was already seated in the chief warlock's high-backed chair at the head of the chamber, wearing robes of deep purple with gold stars. His face was composed, the grandfatherly mask firmly in place. But Harry could feel the magic around him coiling with tension, and behind those half-moon spectacles, the blue eyes were sharp and calculating and deeply, deeply worried. Good. Fudge was to Dumbledore's right, looking pompous and self-satisfied in his lime-green bowler hat. Umbridge, squat, pink, toad-like, sat behind him with a clipboard and a smile that made Harry's skin crawl. Lucius Malfoy was on the far side of the chamber, his white blonde hair gleaming, his expression one of amused disdain that faltered noticeably when he saw Harry's ring. Harry reached the central floor. The chamber was nearly full now, and the murmuring had reached a low roar. He could feel Daphne at his right shoulder, steady as a heartbeat, and Neville at his left, vibrating with nervous energy but standing firm. Dumbledore stood. His voice, amplified by the chamber's acoustics, cut through the noise like a knife. "This session of the Wizengamot is called to order. We have a full agenda, Chief Warlock," Harry said, and his voice carried without amplification. The sovereign magic in his core resonated with the chamber's enchantments. They'd been built for him, after all, built for whoever held the supreme seat. His words filled the room like a bell. "Before you proceed, I have a matter of precedence to raise." Every head in the chamber turned. The murmuring died instantly. Dumbledore looked at him over his spectacles. The grandfatherly twinkle was present but strained, like a lamp running low on oil. "Harry, my boy, this is most irregular. Perhaps we could discuss, I am not your boy." The words were quiet and absolute. "I am Harry James Potter, Lord of the Houses of Potter, Peveril, Gryffindor, Evans, Ravenclaw, Black, Slytherin, Hufflepuff, Gaunt, Flamel, Emrys, Lefay, Pendragon, Aldrich, and Wulfric. I hold 16 hereditary seats on this body. And I am here to claim them." He raised his right hand. The sovereign ring blazed with light, not subtle, not gentle, a blaze of power that cast shadows across the chamber and made the star map on the ceiling flare and spin. 16 crests burned in the air above the ring like a crown of fire. The Wizengamot erupted. Not with words, with magic. The chamber's ancient enchantments reacted. The seats belonging to Harry's 16 houses, scattered across the tiered benches, some of them occupied by proxies who'd been placed there by Dumbledore, began to glow. Gold light outlined each one, and the occupants found themselves gently but irresistibly pushed to their feet and out of the seats, as if invisible hands were clearing space. Madame Bones, seated in the judiciary section, shot to her feet. "Order! What is, the chamber recognizes a valid claim," said a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere, the Wisengamot's own enchantment, awakening for the first time in living memory. 16 hereditary seats claimed by right of blood. The sovereign seat is invoked. At the very top of the chamber, above even the chief warlock's chair, a seat materialized. It had always been there, technically, carved into the stone, hidden behind illusion wards that made it look like bare wall. Now it shimmered into visibility, a throne of dark stone inlaid with gold, positioned at the apex of the amphitheater, looking down on every other seat in the chamber. The sovereign seat. Empty for 900 years. The silence in the chamber was total. 147 of the most powerful witches and wizards in Britain stared at Harry Potter, and Harry Potter stared back without flinching. Dumbledore's composure cracked. Just slightly, just for a moment. Harry saw it, the flash of raw fear behind the twinkle, the whitening of the knuckles on the elder wand. The old man recovered quickly, but the damage was done. Half the chamber had seen it too. "Harry," Dumbledore said, and his voice was carefully, precisely warm. "This is extraordinary. Perhaps we should adjourn and discuss." "We will not adjourn." Harry walked forward, and his footsteps echoed in the silence. "We will address this now. I have claimed my seats. The chamber's own enchantments have verified my claim. Any challenge to my right must be made by formal duel or blood test, those are the rules this body was built on." He stopped in the center of the floor and turned slowly, addressing the entire chamber. "For the past 14 years, Albus Dumbledore has held proxy votes for 16 Wisengamot seats that belong to me, seats he was never authorized to claim, seats attached to lordships he actively concealed from their rightful owner. Every vote he has cast using those proxies is fraudulent." The murmuring started again, louder, sharper, with an edge of fear. Harry could feel the political calculations rippling through the room as decades of carefully balanced power structures suddenly shifted. "I move," Harry said, "for an immediate audit of all proxy votes cast by the chief warlock in the past 14 years. "Seconded." "Seconded," said Cyrus Greengrass from the middle tiers, his voice calm and clear. "Seconded," said Augusta Longbottom from 2 rows above him. Neville's grandmother, formidable and sharp in her vulture-topped hat, had not been briefed, but she was smart enough to read the room, and she'd been suspicious of Dumbledore for longer than anyone knew. "Seconded," said 3 more voices from the Greengrass Alliance network, and then 2 more from houses Harry didn't yet know, and suddenly the motion had momentum. Fudge was on his feet, sputtering. This is outrageous. You can't simply, a child cannot, a lord of 16 houses can," Daphne said from Harry's right, her voice cutting through Fudge's bluster like a blade through silk. "The Wisengamot Charter of 1289, Section 14, any seated lord may move for audit of proxy votes upon valid claim of misrepresentation. The charter does not specify a minimum age. It specifies only valid lordship. His Grace's lordship has been verified by Goblin blood test and confirmed by this chamber's own enchantments." She produced the legal brief, the one she'd been writing since she was 12, and sent it floating through the air to land on Madame Bones's desk. Amelia Bones picked it up. She began to read. Her face went very still. Dumbledore stepped down from the chief warlock's chair. He moved to the center of the floor, placing himself across from Harry, and the chamber held its breath. The 2 of them stood 6 feet apart, the old man and the boy, except the boy wasn't a boy anymore, not really, and the old man's carefully constructed persona was showing cracks. "Harry." Dumbledore's voice was quiet now, pitched for the 2 of them alone, except the chamber's acoustics carried it everywhere, and he knew that, and chose to speak anyway. "I understand you're angry. You've discovered things that, taken out of context, must seem deeply troubling. But I assure you, everything I've done has been for your protection. The dangers you face, you suppressed 85% of my magical core. Harry's voice was flat. You placed loyalty compulsions on a 1-year-old baby. You tampered with my memory. You stole 4.5 million galleons from my family's vault. You intercepted my mail for 14 years. You let my godfather rot in Azkaban without a trial because a free Sirius Black would have taken custody of me and ruined your plan. He paused. Would you like me to continue? I have documentation. The chamber was deathly silent. Every eye was on Dumbledore. The old man's mask didn't slip this time. Instead, something worse happened. It settled, hardened, became the face of a man who had made terrible choices and believed in every single one of them. The sovereign line was never meant to return, Dumbledore said, and there was no warmth in his voice now. There was only the cold conviction of a man who'd spent a century believing he knew best. The concentration of that much power in one individual is a danger to the entire magical world. I have seen what happens when one wizard holds too much. I fought Grindelwald, I watched Tom Riddle rise. The sovereign title is a relic of a darker age, and I did what I believed necessary to prevent its return. You decided that for me, Harry said. You decided it for my parents. You decided it for the entire magical world without asking anyone's permission. Because someone had to. No. Someone didn't. That's the point, Professor. That's always been the point. You saw power and you were afraid of it, so you locked it in a cupboard and hoped it would die. But it didn't die. I didn't die. And now you're standing in front of a body of lawmakers, admitting on the record that you deliberately suppressed a child's magic and stole his birthright because you thought you knew better. Dumbledore's jaw tightened. Madam Bones, Harry said, without looking away from Dumbledore. I trust you've had time to review the initial documentation. I have. Amelia Bones's voice was cold and professional and absolutely furious. If even a quarter of these claims are substantiated, and they appear thoroughly documented, then the chief warlock has committed multiple violations of magical law, including illegal magical suppression of a minor, unauthorized access to sealed vaults, mail fraud, and obstruction of justice in the matter of Sirius Black's imprisonment. The chamber erupted. Fudge was shouting. Malfoy was smiling in a way that made Harry's skin crawl. The dark faction would be delighted to see Dumbledore fall, regardless of who pushed him. Augusta Longbottom was on her feet, demanding answers about the Longbottom connection. Reporters in the press gallery were scribbling so fast their quills were smoking. Dumbledore stood in the center of it all, and for just a moment, just one heartbeat, Harry saw him clearly. Not the mask. Not the manipulator. The man beneath. Old and tired and genuinely frightened, not of Harry, but of a world where the power he'd spent a century trying to control slipped through his fingers. Harry felt something complicated in his chest. Not sympathy, he was too angry for that. But recognition. Dumbledore wasn't evil. He was something worse. He was a good man who'd convinced himself that his fear justified his cruelty. I'm not moving to have you arrested, Harry said quietly, cutting through the chaos. The chamber fell silent again, the sovereign's voice demanded it. Not today. Today I'm claiming what's mine. The audit will proceed. Your proxy votes are revoked. The Wizengamot will function as it was meant to, with every seat filled by its rightful holder. He turned and walked toward the steps that led up to the sovereign's seat. Every eye in the chamber tracked him. He climbed the tiers, past row after row of seated lords and ladies, past allies and enemies and 100 people who were rapidly recalculating their place in a new world. He reached the throne and sat down. The stone was cold for exactly 1 second. Then the sovereign's magic flooded into it, and the throne blazed with golden light, and the enchantments in the ceiling spun wildly, and every ward in the Ministry of Magic, every single protective spell, from the atrium to the deepest level, resonated with recognition. Harry looked down at the Wizengamot from the seat that had been empty for 900 years. "Now," he said. "Let's discuss this defense educational decree." The session lasted 4 hours. It was, by universal agreement, the most extraordinary session of the Wizengamot in living memory. Harry dismantled the Umbridge appointment in 15 minutes. The educational decree required a simple majority to pass, and with his 16 seats plus the Greengrass Alliance, the motion didn't stand a chance. Fudge turned an impressive shade of purple. Umbridge's smile curdled into something that looked like it might curdle milk. The decree died on the chamber floor, and with it, the Ministry's bid to control Hogwarts. Next came Sirius. Harry formally requested a trial for Sirius Orion Black, citing the Sovereign's prerogative to demand judicial review for any citizen denied due process. Madame Bones seconded it before anyone else could speak. The trial was scheduled for 2 days hence. Then the audit motion. It passed 68 to 43, with 36 abstentions. The abstentions were telling, people who wanted to see which way the wind blew before committing. Harry noted every name. Dumbledore voted against, of course. He also sat through the entire session with perfect composure after his moment on the chamber floor, neither interrupting nor obstructing, his blue eyes fixed on Harry with an expression that was impossible to read. When the session ended, he departed without a word. Harry watched him go and felt the old man's magic tighten around him like armor. Dumbledore was retreating, but he wasn't broken. He was regrouping. The most dangerous version of Albus Dumbledore was one who'd been publicly humiliated and had time to think. Harry would have to move fast. The press gallery emptied in a stampede, reporters racing for the exits to file their stories. By morning, every magical household in Britain would know what had happened. The Daily Prophet would probably spin it half a dozen ways before settling on a narrative, but the facts were too dramatic and too public to bury. The Sovereign of Magic had returned, and the Chief Warlock had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Harry descended from the throne as the chamber emptied. Neville was waiting at the bottom of the steps, and the expression on his face was something Harry would remember for a long time, pride and disbelief and fierce, burning loyalty. "You just," Neville started. "Yeah. In front of everyone, yeah. Harry, that was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. And I've seen you face a dragon. This was scarier than the dragon, honestly." Daphne appeared at his right shoulder. Her composure was intact, but there was a flush of color high on her cheeks that betrayed her excitement. The Prophet reporter cornered Fudge on his way out. He was babbling. Umbridge tried to hex a journalist and had to be restrained by Aurors. And Dumbledore? Gone. Apparat from the atrium. My sources say he went directly to Hogwarts. She paused. He'll try something. He's not the type to accept defeat gracefully, regardless of how graceful he makes it look. I know. That's why we move on multiple fronts simultaneously. Sirius's trial in 2 days. The Goblin meeting in 3. Between now and then, I want every document in those 16 vaults catalogued and cross-referenced. There are weapons in there, political weapons, legal weapons, magical weapons, and I want them all on the table. I'll coordinate with Gringotts, Daphne said. Father's already begun reaching out to the abstention block. 3 of them have responded positively. Give it a week and we'll have a supermajority. They walked out of the Wizengamot chamber and into the corridor, and Harry felt the weight of what he'd just done settle on his shoulders, not crushing, but present. He'd declared himself. There was no going back. The lift carried them up to the atrium, and as the doors opened, Harry saw that a crowd had gathered. Not a hostile crowd, a waiting crowd. Ministry workers, visitors, people who'd heard the news filtering up from the depths. They stared at him as he stepped out, and the silence was thick with something that might have been awe or fear or hope. Harry walked through them. He didn't rush, didn't avoid their eyes, didn't project false modesty. He was the Sovereign of Magic, and he'd just reshaped the political landscape of magical Britain in an afternoon, and pretending otherwise would be an insult to everyone in the room. A young witch near the fountain, barely out of Hogwarts, wearing the robes of a junior ministry clerk, stepped forward. Her voice shook. "Is it true? You're really the sovereign?" Harry stopped. He looked at her, and he could feel her magic, nervous, bright, full of a hope she didn't quite dare express. "It's true," he said. What does that mean? For us?" The crowd pressed closer. Every ear in the atrium strained to hear. Harry thought about the cupboard under the stairs. About a boy who'd been told he was nothing, who'd been locked away, suppressed, controlled, used. About a world that had been told the same thing, that they needed someone above them to make their choices, that power belonged to the few, that the old ways were dead. "It means things change," Harry said. "It means the people who've been making decisions for you without your knowledge don't get to do that anymore. It means alliances that have been broken will be honored. It means the magical world belongs to everyone in it, not just the purebloods, not just the ministry, not just one old man in a tower." He paused. "It means I'm going to fix this. And I could use your help." The young witch stared at him. Then she nodded, fiercely, and the crowd murmured, and Harry felt something shift in the room, a current, a tide, a turning. He walked out of the Ministry of Magic and into the London evening, and Daphne and Neville walked with him, and behind them, the wizarding world began to wake up. Potter Manor was quiet when they returned. Sirius was waiting in the entrance hall, pacing like the dog he sometimes was, and he pounced on them the moment they stepped out of the flue. "Well? How'd it go?" "I've been going mad, the mirrors don't reach the Wizengamot chambers, the wards are too thick, we won," Harry said simply. He gave Sirius the summary over dinner, the five of them around the formal table, food growing cold as the story unfolded. Sirius's face cycled through emotions so fast it was almost comical, delight at Umbridge's defeat, savage satisfaction at Dumbledore's humiliation, wide-eyed disbelief at the sovereign's throne. "You actually sat in it," Sirius said. "The sovereign's seat. Merlin's throne. It's not Merlin's throne, technically. It's the sovereign's. Merlin was one of the sovereigns, but the line goes back further than him. You sat in a chair that Merlin also sat in. Harry, do you understand how mental that is?" "I'm beginning to." "Your trial is in 2 days," Daphne said, steering the conversation back. "Madame Bones is handling the judicial proceedings personally. She's furious about the irregularities in your case. She's been suspicious for years, apparently, but Dumbledore's influence in the Wizengamot blocked every inquiry she tried to open." Sirius's expression sobered. "Pettigrew. Without him, Ragnarok has offered Goblin testimony regarding Pettigrew's appearance in their records. The Marauder's map was partially Goblin enchanted, and Gringotts has a magical resonance record of every sentient being that enters its premises. Pettigrew was detected in Hogwarts and later in the company of known Death Eaters. Combined with Harry's testimony under Veritaserum, Dumbledore's own admission that he knew of Pettigrew's survival, and the medical records from 3rd year, the case is airtight." Sirius stared at Daphne. "You're terrifying." "Thank you. That was a compliment." "I know. That's why I said thank you." Neville snorted into his pudding, and even Cyrus cracked a thin smile. The evening wore on. Cyrus departed to continue his political work, the abstention block wouldn't court itself. Neville fled home with a promise to return in the morning, his new wand clutched in his hand like a lifeline. Sirius retreated to a guest room with a bottle of fire whiskey and a stack of Harry's recovered correspondence, intent on reading every letter Dumbledore had intercepted. Harry and Daphne ended up in the study, because of course they did. There was too much to do, too much to plan, and both of them ran on the same fuel, the electric, addictive energy of momentum. "The Hogwarts question," Daphne said, spreading a map of the castle across the desk. "You own it. Through the founder claims, yes. The headmaster serves at the pleasure of the Board of Governors. The Board of Governors serves at the pleasure of the founders. With all 4 founder claims, you have absolute authority over the school. I'm not removing Dumbledore as headmaster. Harry saw her eyebrow rise and held up a hand. Yet. He's still the most knowledgeable wizard in Britain regarding Voldemort's Horcruxes and operations. I'd rather have him where I can see him, doing useful work, than have him become a free agent with a grudge. That's a dangerous game. Everything from this point forward is a dangerous game. But think about it, Dumbledore at Hogwarts, stripped of his political power but still running the school, is a Dumbledore who's contained. He'll focus on Voldemort because that's the one area where his expertise is genuinely indispensable. We let him do what he's actually good at, and we handle everything else ourselves. Daphne studied him for a long moment. You're not just powerful. You're clever. That's the combination that changes the world. Or destroys it. Not you. She said it with a certainty that surprised them both. Not you, Harry. He held her gaze for a beat longer than was strictly necessary, and something warm and unnamed passed between them, and then Daphne cleared her throat and looked back at the map. The wards, she said, all business again. When you return to Hogwarts, the castle will recognize you as its owner. That gives you complete control over every ward, every enchantment, every hidden room and passage. Including ones Dumbledore doesn't know about. There are rooms even the headmaster can't access. The founders built the castle for the sovereign. There are chambers that respond only to the supreme claim. Dumbledore's been headmaster for decades and has never seen more than about 60% of the actual castle. Harry looked at the map. Hogwarts. The first place that had ever felt like home. The place where he'd been sorted, made friends, fought basilisks and dark lords. The place where Dumbledore had watched him from behind his desk and calculated how best to use him. It was his. All of it. When we go back in September, Harry said, everything changes. Everything's already changed. Daphne stood, gathering her notes. It changed the moment you walked into Gringotts. Now we just have to make sure the rest of the world catches up. She moved toward the door, then stopped. They kept doing this, reaching the threshold and pausing, as if there were things that could only be said in doorways. Harry. Yeah. The session today. When you stood up and spoke, when you claimed the throne. I've spent my entire life preparing to stand beside the sovereign. I studied strategy, politics, law, magical theory. I modeled scenarios and built contingency plans and learned to read people like books. She paused. Nothing I prepared for came close to what it actually felt like, standing in that chamber, watching you become what you were always supposed to be. And how did it feel? Like the world finally made sense. She left. Harry sat behind his father's desk, in his family's house, wearing his family's ring, and thought about everything that had happened in 48 hours. 2 days ago he'd been a beaten boy in a dark bedroom. Tonight he was the sovereign of magic, with allies rallying, enemies reeling, and a war on 2 fronts that he intended to win. He pulled the map of Hogwarts toward him and began to plan. Outside, over Potter Manor's ancient grounds, the stars came out one by one, and the ley line beneath the estate pulsed with steady, ancient power, and somewhere in Scotland, the castle on the hill stirred in its sleep and dreamed of its master's return. Chapter 3, The Sovereign Wakes. The trial of Sirius Black happened on a Thursday, and it lasted 47 minutes. Harry had expected a battle. He'd prepared for one, legal briefs, Goblin testimony, a Veritaserum verified statement from himself, backup documentation running to 300 pages. Daphne had wargamed 7 different scenarios, from Fudge attempting a procedural block to Dumbledore intervening with some last-minute manipulation. They'd prepared for everything. What they hadn't prepared for was Amelia Bones being absolutely, incandescently furious. The head of the DMLE had spent 2 days reviewing the black file, and what she'd found had transformed her from a skeptical ally into a woman on a mission. There was no file. That was the problem. No arrest report, no interrogation transcript, no trial record, no evidence log. Sirius Black had been thrown into Azkaban on Bartemius Crouch's verbal order, with Dumbledore's tacit approval, and nobody had committed a single word of due process to paper. Bones opened the trial by reading the complete list of procedural violations into the record. It took 9 minutes. By the time she finished, half the Wizengamot looked physically ill, and the other half were frantically trying to calculate whether they'd been personally involved in any of the irregularities. Sirius sat in the accused chair looking thin and haunted and defiant. Harry sat in the sovereign seat above, watching. Daphne sat to his right, still as a statue, tracking every face in the chamber. The Veritaserum testimony took 12 minutes. Sirius, under the potion's influence, laid out the truth in flat, emotionless sentences. He was not the Potter's secret keeper. Peter Pettigrew was. Pettigrew had betrayed the Potters and then staged his own death, killing 12 Muggles in the process. Sirius had been framed. The Goblin representative, a sharp-featured cursebreaker named Griphook, whom Harry had met years ago, presented the Gringotts resonance records showing Pettigrew's magical signature within Hogwarts during the 1993 to 1994 school year, and later in proximity to known Death Eater safe houses. Nobody challenged the evidence. Nobody could. The only person who tried was Lucius Malfoy, who rose to question the reliability of Goblin testimony, and was shut down by Madame Bones with a single sentence: "The Wizengamot has accepted Goblin testimony as admissible evidence since the Treaty of 1473, Lord Malfoy. Sit down." 47 minutes. Unanimous acquittal. Sirius Black walked out of the Wizengamot chamber a free man for the first time in 14 years. He made it as far as the corridor before his legs gave out. Harry caught him, one arm around his godfather's shoulders, taking his weight easily, and if the reporters who were already flooding out of the press gallery got photographs of the Sovereign of Magic holding up a weeping Sirius Black, so be it. Some things were more important than image. "It's done," Harry said quietly. "It's over, Sirius." Sirius couldn't speak. He just held on, his face buried in Harry's shoulder, his body shaking with 14 years of imprisoned grief finally finding its exit. Daphne positioned herself between them and the press, her wand out, her expression daring any reporter to take one step closer. None of them did. Neville appeared with a glass of water and a blanket, conjured, Harry noticed, with a casual flick of his new wand. The Thunderbird Core wand had transformed Neville's magic overnight. Spells that had been labored and uncertain now flowed from him with natural ease, and there was a confidence in his movements that hadn't been there a week ago. They got Sirius home to Potter Manor, settled him in front of the fire with a cup of tea that was mostly fire whiskey, and let him be. Some things needed time, not words. Harry retreated to the study with Daphne. There was no time to rest. Tomorrow was the meeting with the Goblin King, and after that, Hogwarts. The journey to the Goblin King began at midnight. Ragnarok met them in the depths of Gringotts, below even the cleansing hall, in a tunnel that Harry's sovereign senses told him ran deep, deeper than any vault, deeper than the underground lake where the dragons were kept. The tunnel sloped downward at a steep angle, carved with runes that glowed a dim, pulsing amber, and the air smelled of iron and earth and something electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. Harry had brought Daphne. Ragnarok had raised an eyebrow at this but said nothing. The Greengrass family's connection to the sovereign line was known to the goblins, and respected. They walked in silence for 20 minutes. The tunnel leveled out and widened, and Harry became aware of sound ahead, not the silence of empty stone, but the living noise of a populated space. Hammers on metal. Voices in gobbledygook. The roar of forges. They emerged into a cavern so vast that Harry's breath caught. The Goblin City spread beneath them like a jeweled bowl scooped from the earth's heart. Buildings of dark stone and bright metal climbed the cavern walls in terraced rows, connected by bridges and staircases that defied geometry. Forges blazed at the lower levels, their light painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Thousands of goblins moved through the streets, and the sound of their civilization, industry, commerce, life, echoed off the cavern ceiling like a symphony. Merlin, Daphne whispered. Not even Merlin saw this, Ragnar said, with evident satisfaction. The last sovereign to stand where you stand was Aldrich himself, 9 centuries ago. Welcome to Cragmore, Mr. Potter. The heart of the Goblin nation. They descended into the city, and goblins stopped to stare. Word traveled fast, Harry could see it rippling through the streets, heads turning, conversations halting. A human in Cragmore. A sovereign in Cragmore. Some of the older goblins pressed their fists to their chests in a salute Harry recognized from the cleansing hall ritual. Others simply watched, their dark eyes unreadable. The Goblin King's Hall was at the city's center, carved from a single massive column of natural stone that rose from floor to ceiling like a pillar holding up the world. Guards in full battle armor flanked the entrance, and they crossed their spears as Harry approached. Ragnar spoke a word in gobbledygook. The spears uncrossed. Inside, the hall was spare and functional, no gold, no ostentation. Rough stone walls, iron braziers, a long table of dark wood. At the head of the table sat a goblin who made Ragnar look small. Overlord Ragnar was ancient. Harry could feel it, not just age, but accumulated power, like geological strata. The Goblin King was broad and scarred, his skin the color of old iron, and he wore no crown. He didn't need one. The authority in the room bent toward him like gravity. Ragnar looked at Harry with eyes that were black from edge to edge, no white at all, and said nothing for a long time. Then he spoke, and his voice was like gravel in a rockslide. You are small for a sovereign. I'm 15, Harry said. Give me time. Ragnar stared at him for another beat. Then he laughed, a deep, grinding sound that shook dust from the ceiling. Aldrich said something similar when I met him. He was 17 at the time. I was considerably younger. The ancient goblin leaned forward. Sit, sovereign. We have much to discuss and centuries of silence to break. They sat across from each other at the dark table, Daphne at Harry's right and Ragnar at Ragnar's left, and the conversation that followed was unlike anything Harry had experienced. Ragnar didn't negotiate like a human politician. There was no hedging, no subtext, no testing of positions. The Goblin King laid out his people's grievances with brutal clarity, centuries of broken treaties, the wand ban, the legal classification of goblins as beings rather than people, the systematic exclusion of goblin kind from magical governance, the theft, and Ragnar used that word deliberately, of goblin-made artifacts by wizarding families who claimed ownership rights that violated goblin law. Harry listened without interrupting. When Ragnar finished, the cavern was quiet except for the distant sound of forges. You're right, Harry said. All of it. The treaties were broken. The laws are unjust. And I'm not going to sit here and make excuses for the wizards who came before me. Ragnar's black eyes narrowed. Pretty words. We have heard pretty words before. Then don't listen to my words. Watch what I do. Harry placed his right hand flat on the table. The sovereign ring pulsed, and a soft golden light spread from his palm across the dark wood. I am invoking the Treaty of Cragmore. The original. Signed by Aldrich Pendragon Emrys and your predecessor in 1087. Full mutual recognition, full alliance, full restoration of goblin rights within sovereign territory. Ragnar went very still. The Treaty of Cragmore, the old goblin said slowly, grants the goblin nation the right to bear wands. The right to representation in magical governance. The right to self-determination within our own territories. It was voided by the Waisengamot in 1631, and every sovereign since. He stopped. There has been no sovereign since. There is now. And I'm restoring the treaty. Not a new version, not a modified version, the original, in its entirety. I'll push it through the Waisengamot with my voting bloc. I'll personally enforce it against anyone who objects. He met Ragnar's eyes. Your people have been treated as second-class citizens in a world they helped build. That ends now. Silence stretched. Ragnar looked at Ragnarok, and something passed between them in a language older than words. Then the Goblin King reached beneath the table and drew out an axe, a massive, beautiful thing, its blade inscribed with runes that burned with white fire. He placed it on the table between them. "The Sovereign's axe," Ragnar said. "Forged for Aldrich by my ancestor. It has waited in our vault for 900 years for a sovereign worthy of carrying it." He pushed it across the table toward Harry. "Take it. And know that when you do, the Goblin nation stands with you. In war, in peace, in all things. Until the mountains fall." Harry picked up the axe. It was lighter than it looked, perfectly balanced, the handle wrapping itself around his grip as if it had been made for his hand. Which, in a sense, it had. The runes on the blade flared, and Harry felt his sovereign magic resonate with the goblin craftsmanship, two ancient powers recognizing each other. "Until the mountains fall," Harry said. Ragnar stood and extended his hand, not for a handshake, but palm up, in the goblin gesture of absolute trust. Harry clasped it, palm to palm, and the magic of the Treaty of Cragmore blazed between them, ratified by blood and power and 900 years of patience. The Goblin King smiled. It was a terrifying expression, all teeth and ancient satisfaction. "Now," Ragnar said. "Let us discuss the war." They talked for 3 hours. Ragnar's intelligence network, it turned out, was staggering. The goblins tracked money, and money touched everything. They knew which families were funneling gold to Voldemort's cause. They knew which ministry officials were under the Imperius curse. They knew the locations of 17 Death Eater safe houses, the identities of 43 unmarked supporters, and, crucially, the approximate locations of 3 objects they believed to be Horcruxes. "Your people found Horcruxes?" Harry said, leaning forward. "We found wrongness," Ragnar corrected. "Objects that have been cursed in a way that offends the natural order. Our smiths can feel it, the violation of the soul, forced into physical containment. We identified 3 such objects within our detection range. There are almost certainly more." "I can feel them too," Harry said, and both goblins looked at him sharply. "Since the unbinding, I can feel, it's like a wrongness in the magical field. A dissonance. I felt something in Hogwarts last year, in the room of requirement, but I didn't know what it was. The sovereign bloodline has a natural sensitivity to soul magic," Ragnarok said. "It was one of the reasons the line was established, to guard against exactly this kind of abomination. The one I felt at Hogwarts, it's still there." "Almost certainly." Harry filed that away. When he returned to Hogwarts, finding and destroying that Horcrux would be a priority. The meeting concluded with practical arrangements. Goblin warsmiths would begin producing enchanted armor and weapons for Harry's allies, goblin intelligence would be shared through Ragnarok's communication stone, and a permanent goblin liaison would be stationed at Potter Manor. In return, Harry would push the Treaty of Cragmore through the Wizengamot and personally guarantee its enforcement. As they left Cragmore, climbing back through the ancient tunnel toward Gringotts, Daphne walked beside Harry in silence for a long time before speaking. "You just brokered the most significant interspecies treaty in 900 years. It was already written. I just signed it. You gave them everything they asked for. Full rights, full autonomy, full alliance. The pureblood faction will lose their minds. Good. Let them. I'm not objecting, I'm admiring the strategy. The goblins control the financial infrastructure of magical Britain. With them as full allies rather than reluctant servants, you have economic leverage over every family, business, and institution in the country. Malfoy can posture all he wants in the Wizengamot, but the moment the goblins decide to audit Malfoy family transactions, that's not why I did it." Harry stopped walking. In the dim light of the tunnel, the sovereign ring cast shifting patterns on the stone walls. "Daphne, I know you think in terms of leverage and advantage. That's valuable. I need that. But the goblins aren't a chess piece. They're people who've been treated like lesser beings for centuries. I restored the treaty because it was right, not because it was useful. Daphne studied him. In the amber glow, her expression was impossible to read. Both things can be true, she said. Yeah. They can. But the order matters. Right first, useful second. That's how I'm going to do this. Something shifted behind her eyes, a softening, quickly concealed. Noted, Your Grace. Harry. We're in a tunnel under London. I think that counts as private. They resumed walking, and the silence between them was warm. September 1st arrived with the inevitability of a tide. Platform 9 3/4 was chaos, the usual chaos of students and trunks and owls, amplified by the fact that the wizarding world had spent the past 2 months in a state of rolling upheaval. The Daily Prophet had published approximately 400 articles about Harry since the Wisengamot session, ranging from breathless hagiography to paranoid conspiracy theory. Everyone had an opinion about the Sovereign of Magic, and everyone wanted to share it loudly. Harry walked onto the platform with Sirius at his side, a free, pardoned, legally exonerated Sirius Black, who looked like a different man after 2 months of proper food, sleep, and the kind of peace that comes from no longer being hunted. He was still thin, still scarred, still haunted around the edges. But he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had nothing left to fear. Daphne was already on the platform, flanked by her younger sister Astoria, a small, sharp-featured girl of 13 who looked at Harry with naked curiosity and zero deference. Neville stood nearby, his grandmother beside him, both of them in conversation with Susan Bones, Amelia's niece. The stares started immediately. Students and parents turned to look, whispered to each other, pointed. Harry ignored it. He'd spent 2 months in the public eye and had learned that attention was a tool, not a burden. You couldn't control what people thought of you, but you could control what they saw. What they saw right now was the Sovereign of Magic, dressed in simple but well-cut robes, his ring visible on his right hand, walking through the crowd with a quiet authority that didn't need volume. People stepped aside. Not because he pushed, because something in them recognized that they should. The Hogwarts Express gleamed scarlet in the morning light. Harry helped Sirius with his trunk. His godfather was accompanying him this year, having accepted a position as defense against the dark arts professor at Harry's request and with the Board of Governors' unanimous approval. It had been Daphne's suggestion, and it was elegant. Sirius was qualified, popular with students, and his presence at Hogwarts served as a visible reminder of Dumbledore's failures. Harry was loading his trunk onto the train when a voice behind him said, "Harry." He turned. Hermione Granger was pushing through the crowd, her bushy hair even more anarchic than usual, her face a complex mixture of relief and confusion and something that looked dangerously close to hurt. Ron Weasley was behind her, taller than Harry remembered, his expression a thundercloud. Harry had been expecting this conversation. He'd been dreading it, too, which was a sensation he'd gotten less accustomed to over the summer. He could face down the Wisengamot without flinching, but the thought of looking his best friends in the eye and navigating the wreckage of what Dumbledore had done to all of them was harder. Hermione. Ron. We wrote you, Hermione said, breathless. Dozens of letters. Dumbledore said you were safe, said we shouldn't try to visit, and then, the Prophet, Harry, what's happening? I never received your letters. The old anger stirred, but Harry kept it leashed. This wasn't their fault. Dumbledore was intercepting my mail. All of it. Has been since I was a baby. Ron's expression shifted from angry to confused. The Prophet said something about, Mum. Harry met his eyes. This was the hard part. Ron, I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to hear me out before you react. Ron's jaw tightened. He'd already read the articles, Harry could tell. The financial revelations had made the paper 2 weeks after the Wisengamot session, someone in the audit committee had leaked, and the Prophet had run with it. Is it true? Ron's voice was low and rough. Did my mum take money from your vault? Dumbledore authorized payments from my vault to your mother. 340,000 galleons, listed as a stipend for my care and housing. Harry kept his voice level. Ron, your mum never housed me. She never provided my care. I don't know if she knew where the money was coming from or what it was listed as. I don't know if your dad knew. But I know you didn't, and I know it wasn't your doing. Ron looked like he'd been punched. The color drained from his face and then flooded back, hot and blotchy. 300, that's, he couldn't finish the sentence. Ron. Harry stepped closer. Listen to me. I'm not blaming you. I'm not blaming your brothers or Ginny. Whatever your mum did or didn't know, it doesn't change 4 years of friendship. But I need you to understand that I can't pretend it didn't happen. There's an investigation. There will be questions. You think she knew, Ron whispered. Harry hesitated. Honesty. He'd promised himself honesty, even when it hurt. I think Dumbledore is very good at convincing people that what he wants them to do is the right thing, he said carefully. I think your mum trusts him completely. Beyond that, I don't know, and I won't assume the worst. Ron stood very still for a long moment. His fists clenched and unclenched at his sides. Then he turned and walked away without a word, disappearing into the crowd. Hermione watched him go, stricken, then turned back to Harry. He'll come around. He just needs time. I know. It's okay, Hermione. Is it? Is any of this okay? Her eyes were bright with tears she was refusing to shed. Harry, I've read everything. The suppression, the bindings, you had a piece of Voldemort's soul in your head and nobody told you, it's gone now. The goblins removed it. That's not the point. The point is that Dumbledore, she stopped, visibly wrestling with her own instinct to defend authority figures. It was one of Hermione's deepest patterns, and Harry watched her fight it in real time. The point is that he should have told you. All of it. From the beginning. Yes. He should have. She looked at him, really looked, the way Hermione did when she was solving a puzzle. You've changed. I've been unbound. The magic Dumbledore was suppressing, no, not just that. You. The way you stand, the way you talk. You're not, she struggled for words. You're not waiting for permission anymore. Harry smiled. It was a real smile, warm and slightly sad. No. I'm not. Hermione studied him for another moment, then straightened her shoulders in a way that was very Hermione, deciding on a course of action and committing to it absolutely. What do you need from me? Research. The Horcruxes, I can feel them, but I need to understand the theory. Everything you can find about soul magic, anchoring rituals, and destruction methods. You're the best researcher I know. The familiar light of academic purpose sparked in her eyes. I'll start on the train. I know you will. Harry touched her shoulder. Thank you, Hermione. For being here. She hugged him, fierce and quick, and hurried onto the train. Harry watched her go, then turned to find Daphne watching from a few yards away with an expression of carefully neutral observation. Granger and Weasley, she said. My friends. The Weasley situation is a liability. The Weasley situation is a family dealing with the fallout of someone else's manipulation. I won't throw them to the wolves. I'm not suggesting wolves. I'm suggesting careful management. Arthur Weasley is clean, my father's sources confirm he had no knowledge of the payments. The twins are financially independent. The older brothers are uninvolved. It's Molly and possibly Ginny, the youngest girl has been receiving supplementary payments since her first year, filed under education support, which is suspicious. Harry's stomach tightened. Ginny. I don't have conclusions. I have data points. We'll investigate quietly. Quietly, Harry agreed. And with the presumption of innocence until proven otherwise. You're very insistent on fairness for a man who's been systematically betrayed by almost every authority figure in his life. That's exactly why I'm insistent. I know what it feels like to be judged without evidence. I won't do it to someone else. Daphne's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted, a fractional relaxation, as if she'd passed a test she'd been administering without his knowledge. The train whistle blew. Harry boarded. The Hogwarts Express wound through the Scottish countryside under a sky heavy with clouds, and Harry felt the castle getting closer with every mile. It was a physical sensation now, a pull in his chest, a deepening resonance between his magic and the ancient wards that protected the school. By the time the train crossed into the Highlands, he could feel individual enchantments, the anti-muggle wards, the weather barriers, the protective charms on the greenhouses, the deep and ancient magic that bound the castle to the land. And beneath all of it, the Founder's magic. For distinct signatures, woven together into a matrix of staggering complexity. Gryffindor's magic was warm and fierce, a lion's roar in the blood. Ravenclaw's was sharp and crystalline, every spell precisely placed. Hufflepuff's was deep and steady, the bedrock that held everything together. Slytherin's was cold and clever, serpentine, running through hidden channels that the other three signatures didn't touch. Harry could feel all four. They were his. Daphne sat across from him in the compartment, reviewing notes. Neville was beside her, practicing wand movements with his new cherry wand, each gesture smooth and controlled. The compartment door was warded. Harry had done it casually, a flick of his wand, and the privacy enchantments that settled over the space were so strong that Daphne had looked up from her notes and stared. That was a seventh-year ward scheme, she said. It felt like first year. That's what 85% of your core being unlocked looks like. She shook her head. You're going to terrify the professors. Good. They could use some motivation. The train pulled into Hogsmeade Station as the sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and gold. Harry stepped onto the platform and the air hit him like a wave, thick with magic, saturated with it. Hogwarts was close. The castle's wards pressed against his consciousness like a cat butting its head against his hand, and he let his magic reach back, and, connection established. That was the only way to describe it. One moment Harry was standing on a train platform. The next, he was aware of every stone, every corridor, every staircase, every hidden passage, every enchantment, every ward in Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The castle opened itself to him like a book, and the information flooded in, the location of every person on the grounds, the state of every magical system, the health of every ward. The room of requirement. He could feel it now, clearly, a knot of twisted, wrong magic on the 7th floor. A Horcrux. Hiding in plain sight in a room full of junk, radiating a corruption that Harry's newly awakened senses read like a neon sign. He filed it. Later. Dumbledore was in the castle. Harry could feel him in the headmaster's office, his magical signature tight and controlled, like a fist wrapped in velvet. The old man was waiting. The carriages carried them up the hill, thestrals pulling, visible to Harry now not through grief but through sovereign sight, which saw magical creatures as they truly were, beautiful, skeletal, loyal beasts whose dark magic served a sacred purpose. Harry nodded to the lead thestral, and it dipped its head in acknowledgement. Hogwarts rose above them, its towers dark against the sunset sky, its windows beginning to glow with warm light. Harry looked up at it and felt the castle looking back. Welcome home, Master. Not words. A feeling. A resonance. The castle couldn't speak, not exactly, but it could communicate, and what it communicated now was recognition and relief and a joy so vast and old that it made Harry's eyes sting. I'm here, he murmured. I'm sorry it took so long. The gates opened before the carriages reached them. Every gate, every door, every portcullis in the castle swung wide simultaneously, and the enchanted ceiling in the great hall, which they could see through the tall windows, blazed with stars so bright that students already inside pressed their faces to the glass and gasped. Daphne touched his arm. The castle is responding to you. The castle is happy. Castles don't have emotions. This one does. They entered through the main doors, and the great hall was already filling for the welcoming feast. For long house tables, the staff table at the head, floating candles, the enchanted ceiling. Everything the same as it had been for 4 years, and everything utterly different, because Harry could feel it all now, every enchantment, every protection, every secret the castle held. Heads turned as he walked in. The whispers started instantly, a rising tide of voices that swept through the hall like wind through grass. Harry walked down the center aisle between the Gryffindor and Hufflepuff tables, Daphne on his right and Neville on his left, and he didn't hurry and he didn't hesitate. The staff table was directly ahead. Dumbledore sat in the headmaster's high-backed chair, resplendent in robes of midnight blue, his expression serene and welcoming. If the past 2 months had shaken him, he showed no sign of it. The twinkle was firmly in place. But Harry could feel the truth beneath the mask. The old man's magic was wound tight as a spring, defensive wards layered over his person so thickly that he practically hummed with tension. Dumbledore was afraid. Not of Harry specifically, of what Harry represented. Of the sovereign magic that was even now pressing against the headmaster's wards, testing them, evaluating them, finding them solid but not impenetrable. Harry met Dumbledore's eyes across the length of the great hall, and in that moment something passed between them that was beyond words, an acknowledgement that the rules had changed, that the old dynamic of mentor and student was dead, that what existed between them now was something colder and more complex. Then Harry looked away and sat down at the Gryffindor table. The sorting happened. Harry barely paid attention, he was too busy exploring the castle through his connection. It was intoxicating. He found rooms that didn't appear on any map, passages that led to chambers beneath the lake, an entire wing sealed since Slytherin's departure that was accessible only through a door behind a tapestry on the 4th floor. He found the ward anchors, 4 of them, 1 for each founder, hidden in the deepest parts of the castle, pulsing with magic so ancient and powerful that it made the ley line beneath Gringotts feel like a stream. He also found the Horcrux. It was in the room of requirement, exactly where he'd sensed it from the platform. A diadem, Rowena Ravenclaw's lost diadem, corrupted by a piece of Tom Riddle's soul. The wrongness of it scraped against Harry's senses like nails on a chalkboard. It was defiling the castle, and the castle was in pain, and now that Harry was connected, he could feel that pain too. Tomorrow, he promised the castle. Tomorrow I'll deal with it. The feast ended. Dumbledore gave his welcoming speech, shorter than usual, Harry noticed, and carefully devoid of any reference to the summer's upheavals. The old man introduced Sirius as the new defense professor to a storm of applause, and some nervous looks from students who'd spent 2 years being told Sirius was a mass murderer. He did not mention the sovereign title. He did not acknowledge Harry's presence beyond the usual sweep of the room. Playing it cool. Harry almost respected the strategy. Students filed out toward their dormitories. Harry stood, but instead of following the Gryffindors, he turned to Daphne. Tomorrow morning. Breakfast. I need to make a statement. What kind of statement? The kind that makes it impossible for Dumbledore to pretend nothing's changed. Daphne's mouth curved. I'll be ready. Harry slept in Gryffindor Tower that night. He could have claimed the Sovereign's quarters, he now knew exactly where they were, a suite of rooms on the 7th floor that hadn't been opened in 9 centuries, but there was value in sleeping where people expected him to be. He wasn't hiding his power, but he wasn't abandoning his roots either. Gryffindor Tower was where he'd become himself. It mattered. He woke before dawn. The dormitory was silent, Ron's bed had its curtains pulled tight, and Harry could feel the confused, angry tangle of his friend's magic even through the fabric. Seamus and Dean slept soundly. Neville's bed was empty, a glance through the castle's wards showed him in the greenhouse, already working with plants by wandlight. The boy had found his element. Harry dressed and went to the room of requirement. The 7th floor corridor was empty at 5 in the morning. Harry paced before the blank wall 3 times, but he didn't ask the room for anything specific. Instead, He reached out through his sovereign connection and simply told it to open. The door that appeared was different from any iteration he'd seen before. It was old, older than the castle felt, older than the founders, as if this particular room had existed before Hogwarts was built around it. The handle was wrought iron in the shape of a serpent, and when Harry touched it, the metal warmed under his fingers. Inside was not the room of hidden things. It was a clean, bare chamber of white stone, and in the center, on a pedestal of black marble, sat a tarnished silver diadem set with a sapphire the size of a robin's egg. Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem. And wrapped around it, through it, in it, a piece of Tom Riddle's soul, pulsing with dark magic that made the air taste like copper and rot. Harry approached it. He could feel the Horcrux reacting to his presence. The soul fragment was agitated, pressing against the boundaries of its container, reaching for him with tendrils of dark energy. It remembered him, he realized. The fragment in his scar had been connected to all the others, and this one recognized the magic that had destroyed its sibling. He drew the Sovereign's axe from the mokeskin pouch at his hip, the axe Ragnar had given him, goblin forged, imbued with the kind of magic that could unmake the unmakeable. The runes on its blade flared white. Harry raised the axe. The Horcrux screamed. The diadem rattled on its pedestal, the sapphire blazing with sickly green light, and a face formed in the air above it, Tom Riddle's face, young and handsome and terrified. "You don't know what you're doing," the face hissed. "That magic is mine, the sovereign line was meant to serve." "No," Harry said. "It really wasn't." He brought the axe down. The blade hit the diadem with a sound like a thunderclap, and the Horcrux shattered. The soul fragment erupted upward in a column of black smoke, twisted, shrieked, and disintegrated as the axe's magic tore through it like fire through paper. The diadem cracked in two, the dark enchantment dissolving, and as it did, the sapphire glowed, not the sickly green of the Horcrux, but a pure, clean blue, the color of Ravenclaw's magic restored. The castle shuddered. Harry felt it through every stone, a release, a sigh, as if a splinter had been pulled from its flesh. The wards brightened. The magic in the air cleared. And from somewhere deep in the castle's ancient heart, Harry felt gratitude. He picked up the broken diadem. The sapphire was intact, and the silver, though cracked, was still beautiful. He'd have the goblins repair it. Ravenclaw's legacy deserved better than to be a container for a madman's vanity. One more Horcrux down. And he hadn't even had breakfast yet. The Great Hall at 8 o'clock was a battlefield of adolescent energy, students shouting across tables, owls swooping in with mail, the smell of bacon and coffee and pumpkin juice creating a sensory wall at the entrance. Harry walked through it all and felt the castle's magic dance around him, playful and pleased, still celebrating the destruction of the Horcrux. He sat at the Gryffindor table. Daphne, who under normal circumstances would have been at the Slytherin table, sat down next to him. Every conversation within earshot died. A greengrass at the Gryffindor table. The political implications alone would fuel gossip for weeks. But that wasn't the statement Harry had planned. That was just the preamble. He waited until the hall was at maximum capacity. Dumbledore was at the staff table, eating toast with mechanical precision, his eyes on Harry. Sirius was 2 seats down, looking alert and slightly nervous. The other professors ranged between curious and wary. Harry stood up. The hall noticed. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. The particular silence of collective attention settled over the room like a blanket. Harry didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The castle's acoustics obeyed him now, and his words carried to every corner of the great hall with perfect clarity. "Good morning. I'm going to keep this brief, because most of you would rather eat than listen to speeches, and I respect that." A few nervous laughs. "Some of you have read the papers this summer. Some of you have heard rumors. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. So here it is, plainly, I am the sovereign of magic. I hold all 4 founder claims. Legally, magically, and historically, Hogwarts is mine. The silence was absolute. I'm not here to be your king. I'm not here to give orders or change how this school runs day to day. Hogwarts has professors, a headmaster, and a system that mostly works. I'm not dismantling that. He paused, and his gaze swept the room, every table, every face. But I am here to make three things clear. First, there will be no ministry interference in this school. No educational decrees, no high inquisitors, no politicians using your education as a political football. Hogwarts is independent, and I will personally enforce that independence against anyone who challenges it. A ripple of reaction. Several students at the Hufflepuff table started clapping and then thought better of it. Second, the house system stays, but the prejudice ends. I hold Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff equally. Any student who thinks their house makes them better or worse than another student is wrong, and they're going to find that the castle itself disagrees with them. As if on cue, the enchanted ceiling blazed, all four house colors spiraling together in a display that drew gasps from every table. Third, and this is the important one, there is a war coming. Voldemort is real. He's back. The ministry will deny it because denial is easier than courage, but denial won't protect you when Death Eaters come to your door. Several students flinched at the name. Harry kept going. I will protect this school and everyone in it. That's not a promise from a politician. That's an oath from the sovereign of magic, and it is magically binding. He raised his right hand. The sovereign ring blazed, and the oath took hold. Harry felt it anchor into the castle's wards, felt it become part of the school's protection, permanent and unbreakable. The castle itself accepted the oath and wove it into its defenses. Hogwarts will not fall, Harry said. Not while I breathe. He sat down. For 3 full seconds, the great hall was silent. Then Neville Longbottom stood up at the Gryffindor table, raised his wand, and said clearly, "The Sovereign." Susan Bones stood at the Hufflepuff table. The Sovereign. A Ravenclaw girl Harry didn't know, later he'd learn her name was Lisa Turpin, stood. The Sovereign. And then, like a wave, students across all 4 houses were rising to their feet, wands raised, voices overlapping in a chorus that filled the great hall and shook the rafters. The Sovereign. The Sovereign. The Sovereign. Not everyone stood. The Slytherin table was divided, Malfoy and his circle remained seated, their expressions ranging from furious to calculating. A handful of other students across the houses stayed down, uncertain or opposed. But the majority was overwhelming, and the sound of it, hundreds of young voices raised in recognition, was something Harry would carry with him for the rest of his life. At the staff table, Dumbledore set down his toast. His face was unreadable. Beside him, Sirius Black was grinning like a man watching sunrise after a lifetime of darkness. Professor McGonagall, stern, proper, unshakable Minerva McGonagall, was standing. Her wand was raised. There were tears on her cheeks. Harry caught her eye and nodded, once, and she nodded back, and something passed between them that was both an ending and a beginning. The day's classes were a farce, and Harry knew it. Nobody could concentrate. The announcement had detonated in the school's social fabric like a bomb, and the shockwaves were still reverberating. Students whispered in corridors. Professors discussed it in hushed tones in the staff room. The portraits were in an uproar. Several of them had been alive during the last sovereign's reign and were holding court in their frames, regaling anyone who'd listen with tales of Aldrich Pendragon Emery's. Harry attended classes anyway. Partly because routine mattered, partly because he wanted the faculty to see that he wasn't above the process, and partly because he was genuinely curious about something. What did Hogwarts-level magic feel like when you had access to your full core? The answer, it turned out, was laughably easy. Charms with Flitwick first period. The diminutive professor set them to practicing banishing charms, a 5th-year standard, requiring moderate power and decent aim. Harry flicked his wand and the target cushion didn't just fly across the room, it punched through the stone wall, leaving a cushion-shaped hole and a very startled ghost on the other side. Flitwick stared at the hole. Then at Harry. Then at the hole again. Perhaps, the professor said, in a voice that was only slightly strangled, we should discuss independent study options, Mr. Potter. Transfiguration was similar. McGonagall had them working on vanishing spells, making objects disappear completely. Harry vanished his snail on the first attempt, then accidentally vanished his desk, his chair, and a 3-foot section of the stone floor. McGonagall called a 10-minute break and spent it sitting very quietly at her desk with her eyes closed. The only class that challenged him was Defense Against the Dark Arts, and that was because Sirius wasn't pulling punches. Harry's godfather had designed a curriculum that was half practical combat, half strategic thinking, and he ran the classroom with the intensity of someone who'd spent 12 years in Azkaban and had no patience left for theoretical nonsense. "Pair up," Sirius called, striding between the desks. "Today we're doing shield drills. One attacks, one defends. Rotate every 3 minutes. I want to see Protego variations, standard, expanded, reflective. And nobody is casting anything they can't control, yes?" Harry paired with Neville, and the duel that followed left scorch marks on the ceiling and put a crack in 3 of the classroom's stone pillars. Neville's Thunderbird wand threw spells with a ferocity that startled both of them, and Harry's shields were so strong that reflected spells bounced around the room like pinballs until Sirius had to call a halt to protect the other students. "You two," Sirius said, pointing at them, "are practicing in the training grounds from now on. You're a hazard to architecture." "Sorry, Professor," Neville said, but he was grinning. After classes, Harry went to the headmaster's office. He didn't request a meeting. He didn't send a note. He simply walked to the gargoyle on the 2nd floor, placed his hand on its head, and said, "Open." The gargoyle leapt aside so fast it nearly tripped over its own pedestal. The sovereign's authority over the castle extended to every lock, every ward, every enchanted guardian. Dumbledore's password was irrelevant. The spiral staircase carried him up. The office door was open. Dumbledore had felt him coming, obviously. Harry stepped inside. The headmaster's office was the same as he remembered, circular, filled with whirring silver instruments, the sorting hat on its shelf, Fawkes on his perch. The phoenix trilled when Harry entered, a sound of pure, crystalline welcome, and Harry felt the bird's magic resonate with his own. Phoenixes were creatures of deep magic, of course Fawkes recognized the sovereign. Dumbledore sat behind his desk. The grandfatherly mask was in place, but there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there in June, and his hands, folded on the desk before him, were very still. The stillness of a man exerting great effort to appear calm. "Harry," he said. "Please, sit." Harry sat. He didn't speak. Let the old man make the first move. Dumbledore studied him over his half-moon spectacles for a long moment. Then he sighed, a deep, genuine sigh, laden with years. "I owe you an explanation. You owe me rather more than that. But let's start there." Dumbledore nodded. "When I was a young man, younger than you are now, I found the sovereign prophecy in the Department of Mysteries. It consumed me. The idea that one individual could hold that much power, could reshape the magical world through sheer magical authority, it was the most dangerous thing I'd ever encountered. More dangerous than Grindelwald, more dangerous than any Dark Lord, because at least Dark Lords can be fought. How do you fight someone who is, by magical law, sovereign over everything? You don't fight them," Harry said. "You trust them. Or you don't, and you deal with the consequences. Trust." Dumbledore's voice was soft. "I wanted to, Harry. I wanted to believe that the sovereign could be a force for good. But I had seen what power does. I had seen it in Grindelwald, in Tom, he stopped. In myself. When I was young, before Grindelwald's fall, I had power and I had conviction and I nearly destroyed everything I loved. That lesson never left me. So you decided no one could be trusted with the sovereign's power. Including a baby. Especially a baby. A child raised knowing they were the most powerful being in the magical world, how could that child grow up to be anything but corrupted? I believed, I still believe, in my darkest moments, that the only safe sovereign is one who never knows what they are. And the bindings? The core suppression? The loyalty compulsions? Dumbledore closed his eyes. Necessary evils. Or so I told myself. The suppression was meant to keep you safe, to prevent accidental magic that would have drawn Voldemort's attention. The loyalty modifications were meant to ensure you trusted me enough to follow my guidance when the time came. Every choice I made because I believed it was the only way to protect you and the world from the dangers of unchecked sovereign power. And my parents? Did you believe you were protecting them when you let them die? The words landed like stones in still water. Dumbledore's eyes opened, and for the first time, Harry saw the old man's mask stripped away entirely. Beneath it was grief. Raw, genuine, soul-deep grief, the kind that comes from knowing you've done unforgivable things for defensible reasons. I did not let your parents die, Dumbledore said, and his voice shook. I failed to protect them. The distinction matters to me, even if it doesn't matter to you. The Fidelius charm, the switch to Pettigrew, I advised against it. James insisted. I could have, perhaps I should have, overruled him. Insisted on being secret keeper myself. But I was already, he paused. I was already so deep into the deception that I didn't trust my own motives anymore. Was I trying to protect them, or was I trying to maintain control? I couldn't tell. So I deferred to James's judgment, and James trusted the wrong man, and your parents died, and I have lived with that every day for 14 years. Harry let the silence stretch. He wanted Dumbledore to feel the weight of it. Here's what's going to happen, Harry said finally. You will remain as headmaster of Hogwarts. The school needs stability, and despite everything, you're good at the job. But your authority is now subordinate to mine. You will make no decisions regarding students, staff, or school policy without my knowledge. You will share everything you know about Voldemort's Horcruxes, locations, protections, everything. And you will never, ever attempt to manipulate, bind, or suppress another person's magic. And if I disagree with your decisions? Then you tell me. To my face. Like an honest man. And I'll listen, because I'm not arrogant enough to think I have all the answers. But the final decision is mine. That's the deal. Dumbledore was quiet for a long time. The silver instruments whirred and clicked. Fawkes preened a flight feather. You are more like your mother than your father, Dumbledore said at last. James would have had me in chains. Lily would have given me a chance. You have her mercy and his stubbornness, and I think, his voice caught. I think you may be a better person than I ever was. Probably, Harry said without humor. Now. The Horcruxes. All of them. Right now. And Dumbledore began to talk. The information flowed for over an hour. Dumbledore laid out everything, decades of research, dead ends, breakthroughs. Tom Riddle's history, his obsessions, his patterns. The diary, destroyed in second year. The ring, Dumbledore had found it over the summer in the Gaunt shack, hidden behind lethal protections. He'd nearly died retrieving it, which explained the blackened, withered state of his right hand that he'd been hiding beneath his sleeve. Harry saw the hand and felt a complicated surge of anger and pity. The old man had been trying to solve this alone, in secret, because that was all he knew how to do. Give me the ring, Harry said. Dumbledore hesitated, then produced it from a warded drawer. The gaunt ring, ugly, heavy, set with the same black stone that Harry recognized as the Resurrection Stone. The Horcrux magic was obvious to his senses, a nauseating throb of wrongness. The curse on your hand, Harry said, examining the ring without touching it. It's spreading. How long? Severus believes I have approximately a year. Severus knows. Severus has been my most trusted agent for 14 years. Harry filed that away. Snape's loyalties were a problem for another day. Right now, the ring demanded attention. He drew the Sovereign's axe. Dumbledore's eyes widened at the sight of it. Goblin forged. Goblin forged. Given to me by the Goblin King. Harry, the protections on the ring, the curse that nearly killed me. Harry brought the axe down on the ring. The Horcrux shattered with a wail of dark magic that blew every silver instrument off every table in the office. The black stone cracked, the gold band split, and the soul fragment erupted and died in a single, agonized instant under the axe's purifying fire. The resurrection stone, separated now from the Horcrux, rolled across the desk, intact. Harry picked it up and pocketed it. One more Hallow in his collection. Dumbledore stared at the remains of the ring, then at Harry, and his expression was something Harry had never seen on the old man's face before. Humility. The diary, the ring, the diadem, and my scar, Harry said, counting on his fingers. 4 destroyed. How many more? I believe 6 in total. Perhaps 7, Tom was obsessed with magical numbers. The locket of Slytherin is 1. The cup of Hufflepuff is another. Beyond that, I have theories but no confirmation. His snake, Nagini, may be the last. The locket and the cup. Locations. The locket was hidden in a cave by the sea. I've identified the location but haven't attempted retrieval. After the ring, I thought it prudent to wait. Smart. The cup. I believe it's in Bellatrix Lestrange's vault at Gringotts. Harry smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I have friends at Gringotts. The night was late when Harry finally left Dumbledore's office. He descended the spiral staircase and stepped into the second-floor corridor, and the castle wrapped around him like a warm cloak, protective, attentive, glad to have its master walking its halls. He found Daphne in the library, because of course she was in the library. She'd commandeered a corner table surrounded by a fortress of books and was making notes in a cramped, precise hand that filled every margin. I just had a productive conversation with Dumbledore, Harry said, sitting across from her. Daphne looked up. Her hair had escaped its usual severe pull, and a strand was falling across her forehead. It made her look younger. More real. Productive how? He's cooperating. Full disclosure on the Horcruxes, subordination to sovereign authority, genuine remorse, or at least a very convincing performance of it. And you believe him? I believe he's a man who spent his whole life being the smartest person in the room and has just discovered that the room got bigger. He's adapting. Whether that adaptation includes genuine change or just more sophisticated manipulation, Harry shrugged. I'll find out. In the meantime, he's useful. The Horcruxes? 6 total, we think. I've already destroyed 2 today, the diadem and the ring. The scar fragment is gone. The diary was 2nd year. That leaves the locket and the cup, and possibly the snake. Daphne set down her quill. You destroyed 2 Horcruxes today. Before dinner. The diadem was before breakfast, actually. She stared at him. Then she laughed, not the polished, controlled laugh she deployed in social settings, but a real, surprised burst of genuine amusement that lit up her face and made her eyes crinkle. You're impossible, she said. I've been told. 2 in 1 day. Do you realize that Dumbledore has been hunting those things for decades? He nearly died getting 1. You destroyed 2 before most people had their morning tea. I had advantages he didn't. The axe, the sovereign magic, the fact that I can sense the damn things. Stop being modest. It doesn't suit you. Harry grinned. Fine. I'm extraordinary. Happy. Getting there. She was still smiling, and the warmth of it transformed her face from sharp to beautiful in a way that made Harry's chest do something complicated. The locket, the cave, I can have a tactical plan ready by tomorrow. Not tomorrow. This weekend. I want Neville with us, and I want the goblins on standby in case the protections are nastier than expected. Us? You're bringing me? You're my right hand, Daphne. Where else would you be? She held his gaze. The library was quiet around them, the distant sounds of the castle settling into its nighttime rhythms, suits of armor creaking, portraits murmuring, the lake lapping against the foundations far below. Nowhere else, Daphne said quietly. There's nowhere else I'd be. The moment hung between them, delicate and charged, and then Daphne broke it by pulling a book from her stack and opening it with crisp efficiency. Now. I've been researching sovereign combat techniques, and there's a section in Aldrich's personal journal. Yes, I found it in the Ravenclaw Vault archives. Don't look at me like that. That describes something called the Sovereign's Aegis. It's a ward that extends the caster's protection over an entire area, like a mobile shield covering everything within it. If you can master it, you could project a protective field over all of Hogwarts during an attack. Show me. She turned the book toward him, and they leaned over it together, and the library was quiet and warm, and the castle watched over them like a mother over sleeping children, and outside the windows the Highland sky burned with stars. Chapter 4, Bold Alliances, New Wars. The cave was worse than Dumbledore had described. Harry stood at the edge of a black underground lake, the air thick with salt and dark magic, and felt the wrongness radiating from an island at the center. The water was perfectly still, unnaturally still, the kind of stillness that meant something was holding it in place. Through his sovereign senses, he could feel them beneath the surface. Hundreds of them. Inferi, reanimated corpses, preserved by dark magic, waiting in the freezing depths like a minefield made of dead flesh. Daphne stood to his left, her wand out, her face pale but composed. Neville was to his right, his cherry wand throwing off faint sparks, the Thunderbird Corps responding to the ambient danger. Behind them, 2 goblin warsmiths that Ragnarok had assigned as support waited in silence, their armor glinting in the eerie green light that seeped from the cavern walls. The Inferi respond to contact with the water, Daphne said, her voice low. Touch the surface and they swarm. Dumbledore said there's a boat, Harry murmured. Hidden. Enchanted to carry 1 wizard across. 1 wizard. There are 5 of us. Harry looked at the lake. He could feel the enchantment Voldemort had laid, clever, layered, designed to force a single person to cross alone, weakened and isolated. The kind of trap a paranoid genius builds when he's protecting his most precious secret. The thing was, Tom Riddle had designed this trap for ordinary wizards. Harry raised his hand, palm down, over the surface of the lake. He didn't touch the water. He reached deeper, into the ley line that ran beneath the cave, into the bedrock, into the ancient magic of the coast itself. The Sovereign's connection to the land wasn't limited to Hogwarts. It extended to every inch of magical Britain, though it was strongest at the places of power, the school, the manor, Gringotts, and here, where the land met the sea and the magic ran deep as bedrock. He pushed. The water parted. Not dramatically, not in a biblical spectacle, it simply drew back from a path, retreating to either side like curtains opening, leaving a dry stone walkway from the shore to the island. The Inferi beneath the surface thrashed and churned, but the water held them in place, compressed around them by a force they couldn't fight. Walk, Harry said. Quickly. They crossed. Daphne's eyes were wide, not with fear but with the particular expression she wore when she was recalculating everything she thought she knew. Neville gripped his wand and kept his eyes forward. The goblin smiths moved in professional silence, their dark eyes scanning the cavern with tactical precision. The island was small, a flat circle of rock, maybe 20 feet across, dominated by a stone basin filled with a glowing green potion. And at the bottom of the basin, visible through the liquid, was a golden locket. Harry could feel the Horcrux. It pulsed with the same nauseating wrongness as the diadem and the ring, but stronger. Riddle had layered more protections here, more traps. The potion in the basin was designed to be consumed, and Harry's sovereign senses told him exactly what it would do. induce hallucinations of the dringer's worst memories, cause crippling thirst, and weaken the victim's magic to the point of helplessness. At which point the inferi would do the rest. Elegant, in a monstrous way. Riddle had always been clever. The potion can't be vanished, banished, or bypassed, Harry said, studying it. Riddle anchored it to the basin with blood magic. The only way the basin was designed to empty is for someone to drink it all. Then how? Neville started. Harry drew the Sovereign's axe. Riddle designed this for wizards using wands, Harry said. He didn't account for goblin-forged weapons carrying the Sovereign's authority. He swung the axe into the basin. The stone cracked. The green potion hissed and boiled where the axe touched it, the dark magic in the liquid recoiling from the goblin's steel like a hand from a hot stove. One more strike and the basin split in two, the potion spilling across the island's stone floor where it dissolved into harmless mist, its enchantment broken by the destruction of its container. The locket lay exposed on the broken stone. Gold, heavy, stamped with a serpentine S. The Horcrux inside raged. Harry could feel it screaming, feel the fragment of Riddle's soul hammering against the walls of its prison, terrified. Harry brought the axe down one final time. The locket shattered. The soul fragment died shrieking. 5 Horcruxes destroyed. 2 left, the cup in Bellatrix's vault, and the snake. The cave convulsed. With the Horcrux destroyed, Riddle's enchantments were unraveling. The water surged, the inferi stirred, and the green light in the walls flickered and died. Move, Harry said. Now. They ran for the shore. The water path held, Harry's magic keeping it open through sheer force of will, but the inferi were breaking free, pale shapes surging upward through the disturbed surface, dead hands grasping. One of them broke through the wall of compressed water and lunged for Daphne. Neville hit it with a blast of fire that turned the thing to ash mid-lunge. His wand roared with the spell, Thunderbird magic channeling through cherry wood, and the fire was white-hot, elemental, the kind of flame that burns because the caster's will demands it. Since when can you do that? Daphne shouted. Since right now. They reached the shore. Harry released his hold on the water, and the lake crashed back together with a sound like a cannon shot. The inferi sank back into the depths, their master's enchantments failing without the Horcrux to sustain them. The cave was just a cave now. Dark and cold and empty. Harry looked at the goblin smiths. Your assessment? The senior smith, a scarred veteran named Ironhand, bared his teeth in what might have been a smile. Adequate, Sovereign. The Goblin War Council will be pleased. Harry caught Daphne's eye. She was breathing hard, a strand of hair plastered to her forehead, her robe splashed with cave water. She looked fierce and alive and entirely in her element. The cup next, she asked. The cup next. Ragnarok handled the cup personally. It turned out that having the Sovereign of Magic as an ally made certain impossible things remarkably simple. The Lestrange Vault was one of the most heavily protected in Gringotts, layered with anti-theft enchantments, a Geminio curse that multiplied anything touched, and a waterfall that stripped all enchantments and concealments from anyone who passed through it. All of which was goblin-made. And all of which answered to the director of Gringotts. Ragnarok walked into the Lestrange Vault, deactivated every protection with a wave of his staff, picked up the Hufflepuff cup, and walked out. Total elapsed time, 4 minutes. Harry destroyed the Horcrux in the cleansing hall, the axe singing as it struck. 6 down. The snake remained. They gathered in the study at Potter Manor that evening, Harry, Daphne, Neville, Sirius, Cyrus Greengrass, and Ragnarok via communication stone, to take stock. Nagini is the last, Harry said. She's with Voldemort constantly. Destroying her means confronting him directly. Not necessarily, Daphne said. She was pacing, a habit Harry had noticed she fell into when she was thinking at full speed. Voldemort sends Nagini on missions. She was at the Department of Mysteries last year in the original timeline, in Dumbledore's intelligence projections. He uses her as a scout and occasionally as an assassin. If we can identify when she's separated from him, we'd still need to get close enough to strike, Neville pointed out. And Voldemort has protections on the snake. She's not just wandering around unguarded. The snake is a problem for later, Sirius said. The more immediate problem is that Voldemort is going to move soon. Harry just destroyed 6 of his 7 Horcruxes in the span of a week. The moment he checks on any of them and finds them gone, he'll know. And a Voldemort who knows he's mortal is a Voldemort who's desperate. Let him be desperate, Harry said. Desperate people make mistakes. Desperate Dark Lords level cities. The room was quiet for a beat. Sirius is right, Cyrus said. His usual calm had a harder edge tonight. We need to consider the political battlefield as well as the magical one. Voldemort's strategy has always been twofold, terror and infiltration. The Death Eaters aren't just soldiers, they're politicians, businessmen, ministry officials. Even if Harry can defeat Voldemort in direct combat, the infrastructure of power the Dark faction has built won't collapse overnight. The Wizengamot vote count, Daphne said, stopping her pacing. Where are we? 72 confirmed aligned with us, Cyrus said. That's a simple majority. The supermajority threshold is 98. We're short 26. The Dark faction. 31 seats. Malfoy, Nott, Parkinson, Crabbe, Goyle, and their allied houses. Plus a handful of neutrals who've been intimidated or bribed into alignment. And Fudge? Cyrus's expression soured. Fudge controls 23 appointed seats. He's been playing both sides, publicly supporting Dumbledore's removal from the Chief Warlock position because it's popular, privately negotiating with Malfoy's faction because they're paying him. The man has no principles, only survival instincts. Then we give him a reason to survive on our side, Harry said. What does Fudge want more than anything? To remain minister, Daphne answered instantly. Then we guarantee it. Temporarily. Tell him he has my public support through the next election cycle, in exchange for his 23 votes. He gets to keep his comfortable chair, we get the supermajority, and when the war is won and the political landscape has stabilized, we hold fair elections and let the people decide if they still want him. Cyrus and Daphne exchanged a look. The older Greengrass nodded slowly. It could work. Fudge is a coward, but he's a predictable coward. If he believes you'll protect him from both Voldemort and political rivals, he'll jump. I'll approach him tomorrow, Daphne said. Through intermediaries first, to gauge receptiveness. If he bites, I'll set up a direct meeting. Not at the ministry, Harry said. Here. Potter Manor. I want him on my territory, seeing my power firsthand. Fudge responds to spectacle. Noted. I'll arrange it. The meeting shifted to other fronts. Harry laid out his plans for the alliance outreach that had been consuming his nights for the past week. The goblins were secured. But the sovereign's ancient alliances extended further, to the werewolf packs, the centaur herds, the giant clans, the mare people, and a dozen other magical races who'd been systematically excluded from wizarding society for centuries. I've sent envoys to the centaurs in the Forbidden Forest, Harry said. Through Hagrid, actually, he has relationships with them that no one else does. They're cautious. They don't trust wizards, and I don't blame them. But they're willing to talk. The centaurs see the future in the stars, Neville said quietly. Everyone looked at him. He shrugged. I've been reading. They're seers, in their own way. If the stars are telling them the sovereign has returned, then they already know, Harry finished. Yes. That's what I'm counting on. And the werewolves? Remus is handling that. I owed him last week, had to explain quite a lot, since Dumbledore's been keeping him in the dark too. He was angry. Not at me, at Dumbledore, at the whole bloody system. He's gone to the Pax as my representative, carrying a simple message: the sovereign offers full citizenship, legal protection, and an end to the registration laws, in exchange for alliance. Greyback's pack won't accept, Sirius warned. Fenrir is Voldemort's creature. Greyback's pack is a minority. There are 6 major werewolf packs in Britain. 5 of them want nothing more than to live normal lives without being treated like animals. If I can bring those 5 in, Greyback's pack is isolated. And the giants? Harry grimaced. Harder. Hagrid and Olymp went over the summer. That was Dumbledore's doing, actually, one of the few useful things he arranged. The giants are divided. The Gurg, their chief, was killed in a power struggle while Hagrid was there. The new leadership is unstable. I've sent a formal embassy through Goblin channels, since the giants respect Goblinkind more than wizards, but it's slow going. Sirius leaned back in his chair and ran a hand through his hair. You're building an army. I'm building an alliance. There's a difference. Is there? An army follows orders. An alliance shares a cause. When Voldemort comes, and he will come, I don't want soldiers who fight because I told them to. I want allies who fight because they believe in what we're building. That's how you win a war. More importantly, that's how you win the peace afterward. Sirius studied his godson for a long moment, and his expression was complicated, pride and awe and a sharp ache that Harry recognized as grief for James and Lily, who should have been here to see this. Your mother would have said exactly that, Sirius said. Word for word. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. Fudge capitulated faster than even Daphne had predicted. The Minister for Magic arrived at Potter Manor on a Tuesday afternoon, was treated to a tour of the grounds, during which Harry casually demonstrated the estate's ward system, which could have flattened a small army, a formal dinner, prepared by 3 Potter house elves and rivaling anything the Hogwarts kitchens produced, and a private conversation in the study during which Harry laid out the arrangement in terms simple enough for Fudge's survival instincts to grasp. You support me publicly, vote with my block, and keep the ministry functional during the transition, Harry said. In return, I guarantee your position through the next cycle and protect you from the dark faction. You've been taking Malfoy's gold for years. Yes, I know about it, the goblins track everything, and when Voldemort's war comes to your doorstep, Malfoy won't protect you. I will. Fudge's lime green bowler hat trembled in his hands. You, the goblins, how much do you know? Everything. And I don't care about the past, Minister. I care about what you do next. Fudge signed the agreement before dessert. 23 seats, delivered in an evening. The Sovereign's block in the Wisengamot now stood at 95. 3 seats short of the supermajority. Those 3 seats came from an unexpected quarter. Andromeda Tonks, Sirius's cousin, estranged from the Black family for marrying a Muggleborn, presented herself at Potter Manor the following weekend, flanked by her daughter Nymphadora and carrying a stack of documents that proved 3 minor houses in the Tonks Alliance network had been quietly holding their Wisengamot seats in reserve, waiting for a leader worth following. My mother told me about the Sovereign, Andromeda said, sitting across from Harry in the study with the poise of a woman who'd survived being disowned by the Blacks and emerged stronger. She was a Black, but she was also a scholar. She found references in the family archives before they were sealed. She said the Sovereign would return, and when they did, I should be ready. And are you? I've raised a metamorphmagus daughter, survived a war, built a legal practice from nothing, and maintained 3 political alliances for 20 years without anyone noticing. I'd say I'm ready. Harry liked her immediately. He liked Tonks even more. The young Auror was loud, clumsy, profane, and fiercely competent, and she made Sirius laugh harder than Harry had ever heard him laugh. 98 seats. Supermajority. The Sovereign's block controlled 2/3 of the Wisengamot. Harry used it immediately. In a special session called at his request, the Wisengamot passed 3 pieces of legislation in a single afternoon. First, the Treaty of Cragmore, restored in full. Goblin rights, Goblin wand bearing, Goblin representation. It passed 98 to 49, with the dark faction and a handful of holdouts voting against. When the result was announced, Ragnarok, watching from the gallery, closed his eyes, and Harry saw the old goblin's hands tremble. Second, the Werewolf Citizenship Act, granting full legal status and civil rights to all registered werewolves. Remus Lupin, seated in the gallery beside Ragnarok, wept openly and didn't seem to care who saw. Third, the Magical Creatures Sovereignty Act, recognizing the centaurs, mere-people, and other sentient magical races as autonomous peoples with the right to self-governance within their traditional territories. The centaur representative, a young stallion named Firenze whom Harry had invited personally, stood in the gallery and bowed his head in a gesture of respect that, according to Hagrid, no centaur had shown a wizard in 300 years. The dark faction was apoplectic. Lucius Malfoy's face was the color of old parchment as vote after vote went against everything his faction stood for. The carefully maintained pureblood supremacy that had underpinned wizarding society for centuries was being dismantled in an afternoon, and there was nothing he could do about it. Harry watched Malfoy from the sovereign seat and felt no satisfaction. This wasn't about defeating Malfoy. This was about building something better than what Malfoy's ideology had created. But he didn't feel sorry for the man either. After the session, as the chamber emptied, Malfoy approached. He moved through the crowd with the fluid grace of a practiced politician, his silver-topped cane clicking against the marble floor, and his smile was a masterwork of controlled venom. An impressive display, Lord Potter. Malfoy's voice was silk over steel. You've accomplished in weeks what reformers have failed to achieve in centuries. I wonder, have you considered the consequences? Every one of them. The old families won't accept this quietly. Goblins bearing wands, werewolves walking free, centaurs treated as equals, you've upended the natural order. I've restored it. The natural order, as you call it, existed for centuries before the Wisengamot decided to rewrite it. I'm not creating anything new. I'm undoing what people like you broke. Malfoy's smile didn't waver. And the Dark Lord? You've moved against his interests rather aggressively. He won't appreciate that. He'll appreciate it even less when I kill him. The smile cracked, just slightly. Malfoy's grey eyes flickered with something, not fear, exactly, but recalculation. The man was a survivor above all else, and he was looking at the landscape and seeing the ground shifting beneath his feet. A word of advice, Lord Potter, from one political creature to another, Malfoy said softly. Power won rapidly is often lost the same way. You have allies now, but allies are only allies so long as you're winning. Then I'd better keep winning. Harry turned and walked away, and didn't give Lucius Malfoy the satisfaction of a backward glance. October bled into November, and the world held its breath. Harry could feel Voldemort now, not through the scar, which was healed and silent, but through the sovereign magic, which was sensitive to dark magic the way a seismograph was sensitive to earthquakes. The Dark Lord was a constant presence at the edge of Harry's awareness, a cold knot of malice and power moving through the magical landscape like a storm system. Voldemort knew. Harry was certain of it. The Dark Lord had checked his Horcruxes. Harry had felt the surge of rage, distant but unmistakable, when the discovery was made. 6 anchors destroyed. Only Nagini remained. For the first time in decades, Tom Riddle was vulnerable, and the knowledge was driving him toward action. The attack came on a Tuesday. Harry was in the library at Hogwarts, working with Hermione on a translation of a Founder-era text about ward construction, when the castle's ward screamed. Not a subtle warning. A full-throated alarm that reverberated through every stone, every enchantment, every magical system in the school. Harry was on his feet before the echo faded, his connection to the castle flooding him with information. The wards were under assault. Multiple points of attack, the main gate, the forbidden forest boundary, and the lake. Dark magic, powerful and coordinated, hammering against protections that had stood for 1,000 years. Death Eaters. Dozens of them. And behind them, cold and terrible and radiating a malice that made the air taste of ash, Voldemort himself. He's here, Harry said. Hermione's face went white. Harry, get to the Great Hall. Tell everyone to stay inside. The castle's internal wards will hold, I'm reinforcing them now. He was already weaving magic through his connection to the school, thickening the protective enchantments around the inhabited areas, sealing corridors, activating defenses that hadn't been used since the Founders' era. Stone guardians stirred in their alcoves. Suits of armor drew swords. The castle was waking for war. Hermione ran. Harry reached for the communication stone in his pocket. Ragnarok. The goblin's voice came back instantly, sharp and alert. Sovereign. Hogwarts is under attack. Voldemort with a significant Death Eater force. I need the goblin war parties we discussed, mobilized to the Hogwarts boundary. Now. They're already moving. We felt the assault on the ley line. 10 minutes. Harry pocketed the stone and moved. Not toward the Great Hall, toward the front doors. The castle opened before him, corridors shortening, staircases rearranging to speed his passage. He burst through the main entrance and into the cold November night. The scene was chaos and fire. Death Eaters swarmed the main gate, 30, 40 of them, their masks gleaming in the light of their own curses. Dark spells hammered the wards in waves, each impact sending showers of sparks into the sky. The ground trembled. The wards held, but Harry could feel them straining, could feel the points of weakness where Voldemort's personal power was bearing down with crushing force. At the center of the assault, standing behind his troops like a general directing a siege, was Voldemort. Tall, skeletal, his red eyes burning in the darkness, his wand tracing patterns in the air as he wove curse after curse into the attack. Nagini coiled at his feet, 20 feet of scale and muscle, her eyes fixed on the castle with animal hunger. Harry walked forward. The night wind caught his cloak, and the sovereign ring blazed on his hand, and his magic rose around him like a tide, visible, tangible, a golden aura that pushed back the darkness. The Death Eaters saw him and faltered. The nearest ones actually stumbled backward. Harry Potter, walking out of Hogwarts alone, glowing with power, carrying a goblin axe in one hand and his wand in the other, this was not what they'd been promised. They'd been promised a schoolboy, a target, a victim. Tom, Harry called, and his voice carried across the grounds like thunder. You're trespassing. Voldemort's red eyes locked onto him. The Dark Lord's thin lips peeled back from his teeth in a mockery of a smile. Harry Potter. The self-proclaimed sovereign. Voldemort's voice was a cold hiss that slithered through the air. I've heard about your little performance. Claiming titles, playing at politics, pretending you matter. You are a child wearing a crown you don't understand. And you're a dead man wearing a face you stole. Let's see whose pretense holds up. Voldemort raised his wand. Kill him. 3 Death Eaters surged forward, wands blazing. Killing curses, cruciatus curses, blasting hexes, a wall of dark magic hurtling toward Harry with lethal intent. Harry raised his left hand, the one without the wand, and the sovereign's aegis deployed. Daphne had found the technique in Aldrich's journal. Harry had practiced it for exactly 1 week. It shouldn't have been enough time to master a technique that had taken previous sovereigns years to develop. But Harry's core was vast, his connection to the land was absolute, and Hogwarts itself was feeding him power through every ley line and ward anchor in the castle. The aegis was a dome of golden light that erupted from Harry's palm and expanded outward in a hemisphere 50 feet across. Every dark spell that touched it didn't just stop, it disintegrated. The killing curses dissolved like smoke. The cruciatus curses shattered like glass. The blasting hexes evaporated without a sound. The 3 Death Eaters who'd cast them stood frozen, staring at the dome of light that had just swallowed their most powerful spells without flinching. Harry dropped the aegis, raised his wand, and attacked. He didn't use unforgivables. He didn't need to. The spells he cast were standard, stunners, bludgeoning hexes, binding curses, but powered by a core that was orders of magnitude beyond anything these wizards had ever faced. A single stunner from Harry hit like a freight train. The first Death Eater it struck flew backward 30 feet and hit the ground so hard he bounced. The second one took a bludgeoning hex to the chest and simply crumpled, his ribs caving in through his enchanted robes. The third tried to apparate and found that Harry had locked down the entire grounds, no one was leaving. "Neville!" Harry shouted. "Now!" Neville burst from the castle doors at a dead sprint, his cherry wand already blazing. Behind him came Sirius, and behind Sirius came 20 students who'd refused to stay in the Great Hall, 7th years mostly, plus a handful of 6th years, all of them members of the defensive dueling club Sirius had been running since September. They hit the Death Eater flank like a hammer. Neville was at the front, and the boy who'd once been afraid of his own shadow was gone completely, replaced by something that looked very much like a Longbottom war commander. His wand threw fire and force with devastating precision, and the Death Eaters he engaged fell one after another, overwhelmed by a ferocity they couldn't match. Sirius fought like the Auror he'd been trained to be, fluid, creative, savage. He dueled 2 Death Eaters simultaneously, his wand a blur, his grin wild and fierce. This was what Sirius Black had been made for, and 12 years in Azkaban had done nothing to dull the edge. The students held their own. They fought in pairs, covering each other, using the tactic Sirius had drilled into them for months. They were scared, Harry could feel it, but they were fighting anyway, and that was the only kind of courage that mattered. But the Death Eaters were just the opening act. Voldemort hadn't moved. The Dark Lord stood at the center of the field, his wand at his side, watching his followers fall with an expression of absolute contempt. He didn't care about the Death Eaters. They were tools, expendable, replaceable. His red eyes were fixed on Harry, and the cold intelligence in them was calculating, probing, looking for weakness. "Enough," Voldemort said. He raised his wand, and the world went dark. Not metaphorically. The light, the stars, the castle's glow, even the golden light of Harry's magic, was swallowed. A sphere of absolute blackness expanded from Voldemort's wand, consuming everything it touched, and within that darkness, the remaining Death Eaters vanished, the battlefield vanished, and Harry found himself standing in a void with nothing but the sound of his own heartbeat and the distant, sibilant whisper of a Dark Lord's magic. "The Sovereign of Magic," Voldemort whispered, and his voice came from everywhere at once. "I have studied your bloodline, Potter. I know what you are. I have spent 50 years preparing for the possibility that the Sovereign line would return. Do you think I feared Dumbledore? Do you think I feared the Ministry, the Aurors, the Order of the Phoenix?" Harry's sovereign senses were reaching through the darkness, trying to locate Voldemort. The void was magical, a construct of dark power, not real darkness, but a spell that isolated them both from the rest of the battlefield. A one-on-one arena constructed from pure malice. "I feared you," Voldemort continued. "The potential of you. The prophecy, the real prophecy, not the garbled version Dumbledore hoards, speaks of the Sovereign's return as the end of all Dark Lords. The final ending. The magic itself turning against those who corrupt it." Harry found him. Not with his eyes, in the total darkness, sight was useless. He found Voldemort through the sovereign connection to the land, through the ley lines that ran beneath the battlefield, through the wrongness that Nagini's Horcrux-tainted magic emitted like a beacon. "That's why you made the Horcruxes," Harry said. "Not just for immortality. To anchor yourself against the sovereign magic." "Clever boy." Voldemort's voice shifted, he was moving. "The Horcruxes were insurance. As long as one remained, the Sovereign's power could not fully manifest against me. The soul magic creates a, what would you call it, a dead zone. A place where the Sovereign's authority cannot reach. Nagini. Yes. My last anchor. My last defense. As long as she lives, you cannot bring the full weight of your power against me. I am shielded. Diminished, yes, your destruction of the others has cost me dearly. But still shielded. A spell screamed out of the darkness, not a killing curse, something worse. Something Harry had never felt before, a twisting, corrosive magic that ate at the fabric of reality itself. Harry threw up a shield and felt the spell crack against it, felt it bite through the outer layers of his defense before he reinforced it. Voldemort was right. With Nagini alive, the Horcrux network, even just one node of it, was creating interference. Harry's sovereign magic was vast, but it was meeting resistance it shouldn't have, like trying to push through a membrane that flexed but wouldn't break. Harry needed to kill the snake. And the snake was out there on the battlefield, beyond the void Voldemort had constructed. Neville. Harry reached out through the sovereign bond, not the castle connection, but the older bond, the one that linked him to the Longbottom line, the oath of war command that had been dormant for centuries until Neville accepted it. He felt Neville on the battlefield, fighting hard, surrounded by chaos. Harry sent a pulse of magic through the bond, not words, but intent, a direction, an image. The snake. Nagini. Find it. Kill it. He felt Neville understand. Now he just had to survive long enough for Neville to do it. Voldemort came at him. The Dark Lord moved through his own darkness like a shark through water, and his magic was horrifying in its intensity. Harry understood now why the wizarding world had feared this man for decades. Voldemort was brilliant, his spellwork was precise, inventive, ruthless. He chained curses together in combinations that left no opening for counterattack. He used the darkness as a weapon, striking from multiple angles, forcing Harry to defend in all directions. Harry fought back. His wand blazed with golden light that pushed back the darkness wherever it struck, and his spells hit with the force of his unbound core. The void rang with the impact of their magic, two titans clashing in a bubble of black nothing, their spells painting the darkness in flashes of gold and green and red. It was the hardest fight of Harry's life. Voldemort was not Quirrell, not the diary's memory, not the shade in the graveyard. This was the Dark Lord at his full power, a wizard who had spent 50 years honing himself into a weapon, who had cheated death and violated the laws of nature and survived everything the magical world had thrown at him. But Harry had something Voldemort didn't. Something the Dark Lord had never understood and never would. Harry fought for the people behind him. The students in the castle. The allies on the battlefield. Neville and Sirius and Daphne and every person who'd stood up when he asked them to. His magic wasn't just power, it was purpose. It was the sovereign's oath, binding and absolute, fueling him with a strength that went beyond his core, beyond his blood, beyond anything Voldemort could match with stolen magic and fractured soul. He pressed forward. Spell after spell, step after step, driving Voldemort back through his own darkness. The Dark Lord's defenses held, but they were bending. Harry could feel it, the Horcrux shield flexing, weakening. And then he felt it. Outside the void, on the battlefield, a surge of wild magic, Thunderbird core, cherry wood, burning with righteous fury. Neville had found Nagini. And Neville had struck. The snake died. Harry felt the last Horcrux shatter through every cell in his body. The interference vanished. The membrane broke. And the sovereign magic, fully manifest for the first time since Aldrich walked the earth, bloomed. Voldemort felt it too. The Dark Lord staggered, his red eyes widening, and for the first time, the very first time, Harry saw genuine terror on Tom Riddle's face. "No," Voldemort whispered. "Yes," Harry said. The darkness shattered. Voldemort's void construct blew apart like glass, and the battlefield erupted back into existence around them, the castle, the stars, the fighters, the goblin war parties that had arrived during the battle and were tearing through the remaining Death Eaters with brutal efficiency. Harry stood in the center of it all, and his magic was a sun. Golden light radiated from him in waves, and where it touched the ground, the earth healed, scorched grass grew green, broken stone mended, dark magic dissolved. The light washed over the fighters and they felt it, warmth, strength, a fierce and unconditional protection that was the sovereign's oath made manifest. Voldemort raised his wand for one last curse. The killing curse, the spell he'd built his legend on, the spell that had started everything in a cottage in Godric's Hollow on Halloween night. Avada Kedavra. The green bolt screamed toward Harry. Harry didn't dodge. Didn't shield. He raised his hand, his right hand, the one bearing the sovereign ring, and caught the curse. The killing curse hit his palm and stopped. It writhed against his skin, green light flickering and buzzing, pouring all of its lethal intent into the sovereign's flesh. And Harry held it. The magic of death itself, captured in his fist, unable to kill a man who was connected to every ley line, every ward, every living magical being in Britain. The sovereign of magic didn't just resist the killing curse. He contained it. "This spell killed my parents," Harry said. His voice was quiet, but it reached every ear on the battlefield. "It killed Cedric Diggory. It's killed thousands of innocents. And it ends now." He closed his fist. The killing curse collapsed inward, compressed by sovereign magic into a point of green light no larger than a grain of sand. Then it winked out. Gone. The magic of death, unmade by the magic of life. Voldemort stared at his empty wand, then at Harry, and in his red eyes there was something worse than fear. There was understanding. Tom Riddle, the brilliant, broken boy from the orphanage who had spent his entire life clawing for power, finally understood what real power looked like. And he understood that he had never had it. "Yield," Harry said. "I am Lord Voldemort." "I do not, you are Tom Marvolo Riddle. You are a mortal man standing in front of the sovereign of magic with no Horcruxes, no army, and no way out. Yield." "I would rather die." "I know," Harry said, and there was something almost like sadness in his voice. "That's always been your problem, Tom. You'd rather die than admit someone else matters more than you." He raised his wand. Stupefy. The spell hit Voldemort with the force of a collapsing building. The Dark Lord flew backward, hit the ground, and didn't get up. Stunned. Not dead. Unconscious, powerless, mortal, and beaten by a spell they taught to third years. Harry stood over the fallen Dark Lord, breathing hard, his magic still singing through every nerve, and looked around the battlefield. It was over. The Death Eaters were down, captured, stunned, bound by goblin chains that no wizard could break. The Goblin war party stood among them, armored and blood-spattered and grinning with the savage satisfaction of a people who'd been waiting centuries for this fight. Aurors were arriving, Tonks among them, her hair blazing red with adrenaline, and the cleanup was already beginning. Neville walked toward Harry through the aftermath, Nagini's severed head in one hand and his cherry wand in the other. He was splashed with snake blood and there was a gash across his cheek and his eyes were bright with something beyond adrenaline. "Got the snake," Neville said. "I noticed." They looked at each other, and then they were laughing, the desperate, slightly hysterical laughter of people who've just survived the unsurvivable. Daphne was next, emerging from the castle at a run, her robes torn, her wand still smoking. She'd been coordinating the castle's internal defenses during the battle, directing the Stone Guardians, managing the ward system, organizing the student evacuation. Her face was pale and there was blood on her hands that wasn't hers. She reached Harry, and for one instant her composure crumbled completely, and she grabbed the front of his robes and pressed her forehead against his chest and breathed. "Don't you ever do that again," she said into his collar. Harry put his arms around her. "Do what?" "Win." She made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Walk out to face a Dark Lord alone, you absolute. I wasn't alone. I had all of you." She pulled back and looked up at him, and her eyes were bright and fierce, and Harry thought that this right here, standing in the wreckage of a battle they'd won, holding a girl who'd spent her whole life waiting for this and fought like a general when it came, this was what the sovereign's power was for. Not the politics, not the titles, not the gold. This. Protecting the people who mattered. Sirius appeared, limping but grinning, and clapped Harry on the shoulder hard enough to stagger him. Your father, Sirius said, his voice thick, would have been insufferably proud. He'd have bragged about that for centuries. What about my mum? Your mum would have scolded you for showing off and then hugged you for an hour straight. Sirius's eyes were wet. Just like she always did with James. The stars came out over Hogwarts, and the castle's wards hummed with renewed strength, and on the battlefield, the sovereign's light lingered like a promise.